Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Well, not exactly. Sort of. I guess I should say, since I just went to see at the 659 Wrightwood Gallery, the first homosexuals, I could say that I'm Edwin in drag. I could say that. But I'd be lying. It's Turi Ryder. Good to be here with you. Edwin's back next week. He's as entitled to a holiday weekend as anybody else, so he took it. And I will also be here Monday for Joan. So we get to spend some time together. And if it should happen that you haven't yet started following Edwin or me, you could do that too. You can follow Heartland Signal on X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Heartland Signal, all one word. And be sure to check Hotland. It has been. It's 95 out there. Heartlandsignal.com for daily updates. We have some really cool people for you to meet today. Just to give you a sneak preview, the artistic director of Steppenwolf's latest, I hate to use the word amazing because it's so overused, but it's hilarious and it is amazing. And it has special effects that Steppenwolf doesn't usually do. It was kind of like, whoa. And the special effect it will have on your heart is also something. So we'll meet the artistic director, co-artistic director for Steppenwolf, who directed this show, and a little bit of crime news that may not have occurred to you. The truckers who listen to this program live, you will not be surprised by this revelation, but I think the rest of you will. And if you have followed the news at all, you will know that CBS News in the form of 60 Minutes just paid a ransom to Donald Trump. Their arm twisted until they cried, I don't know, what did they cry? Fox. They couldn't take the pressure or the financial pressure, and so they caved. And we will talk with who better to dish and tell the truth about what this will mean than the former head of news for the CBS radio station in this town. And an hour, I've asked him for an hour and he's giving it to me. My favorite constitutional lawyer and explainer and professor, David Levine, will be with us for the entire last hour. So prepare your questions. And no, you can't just say, what the hell? You can't say, what the hell is going on with the Supreme Court? Why? Because I'm going to do that. So there you go. That's what's in store. I want to ask you a sort of a personal question. I have a personal question to ask you, and I'm asking it for a personal reason. A lot of Trump voters, you may have noticed, seem really angry. They're just angry. And there are some reasons why, to be fair. They feel angry. They feel like the Democratic Party has overlooked them, neglected them, spends all its time worried about where certain athletes play on certain teams. They just feel like nobody sees them. Young men get out of college, white men in particular, and it was always easy for them to find a gig, and now not so much. And they feel unseen and unheard and unrecognized because they've done their hard work, and they feel like it's not fair. And to some extent, they're right. But the fact that it was unfair to everybody else for years and years and years, that, we can see it if we're not in that demographic, and some of them can see it. But in the micro, it's true. It's unfair. It is. And so they get angry. And now let me tell you about the person in my life who got so angry that I actually think it killed him this past week. I have an old friend, decades old friend, one of the first people to hire me when I was still in music radio. And he was always kind of an independent voter, but he was a 2-time Obama supporter. And then something happened. He went down the anti-vax, pro-Trump rabbit hole. He went down there and got angrier and angrier. He was a middle-aged white guy, always the beneficiary of every construct set up in this country since it was born. But he tried to play fair. He hired women. He hired people of color. He worked with them, for them. He always, in his head, imagined that this was an equal playing field because that's sort of what it looked like to him. But then he launched a business venture, and actually it was a pretty pro-women venture, way ahead of its time. He was a backer of the idea that women's soccer would be popular, and he launched an enterprise related to that. And he was about 10 years too early, and it went down, and he lost a lot of money. And then he just was deflated, because by then he was a middle-aged white guy, and the world, from his perspective, was settled against him. And he took it personally. He took it to heart. And who was speaking to him and guys like him? Donald Trump. And he got angry about the vaccine, because by then he's watching the right-wing stations that support Trump. And he got angry about the vaccine and being forced to take it. And then his spouse got sick, and he couldn't go into the hospital because he didn't have a vaccine. And he got angrier. And then it all just sort of came out. I would get about 5 or 6 emails a day from him just spewing venom about feminism and woke culture and DEI and Democrats and Joe Biden and going to jail. Other people should go to jail, and crime in the city. He lived in the north suburbs, so what the heck he knew about crime in the city, I have absolutely no idea. I live in the city. I feel fine. It ain't Northbrook, but I feel fine. And I'm not bored out of my socks, which, sorry, Northbrook people, I would be bored out of my socks. It's, to me, just personal. A lot of people don't feel that way. That's why they live in Northbrook. And if you tell me one more time, but it's the schools. I don't want to brag about my kids, but they did just fine. Thank you. It's the schools. I have a kid with, I'm going to take a little detour here. I have a kid who has some special needs, and those needs were nicely met by the Chicago Public Schools. But I did have to go in for a hearing with the people who make decisions about what kind of accommodations you're going to make. And one of them actually said to me, well, I live in Buffalo Grove because I have to for my children. And I'm thinking, what I wanted to say was, so you think I'm sitting here to get help for my kid because I don't care about my child? The heck, lady. I have to live in Buffalo Grove for my children. You just want to, okay, I don't want to punch this. I don't. But I did, I needed her because she had to approve this little plan. Okay, back to the point about my friend down the rabbit hole. It got so intense, and I'm like a catechism. I'm trying to remind myself of all the reasons why he is my friend. He's the first guy out the door if a kid falls off his bicycle in the middle of the street. He doesn't care if the family had a big, Biden sign out. If a kid needs help, he's there. He's great to animals. He believes in his, doing right by his town. With his wife out of the hospital, he dedicated himself full time to helping her, except for the times he obviously spent looking at one of those crazy right-wing news sites that aren't news sites and reading crazy anti-vax people who, by the way, are now in charge of all our vaccines. But I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not. He got so angry that about 1.5 years ago, and you may have had this same conversation with a friend of yours who's really angry and really pro-Trump, because, I never saw any Biden people get this head up. Never. But the Trump people, the life is so unfair, and they're accusing the Democrats of being whiny. About 1.5 years ago, I said to my friend politely, you seem a little angry. And I'm worried about your health. I don't think carrying this around is good for your health. And he let me have it. I mean, both barrels. And I had told him, you want to give your political views, that's fine. But the minute you say you, and all you are responsible, if you really feel that way, what do you want to talk to me for? If I'm responsible for locking you in your house during COVID, if I'm responsible for your buddy who lost his job as a pilot, if I'm responsible for all this, what do you want to be my friend for? And then for a few weeks, he would avoid saying you, but then he would go right back to it. But this time, when I told him, I think you're a little bit angry and maybe it's not so good for your... Well, I haven't been to a doctor in 25 years. I'm fine. You should watch your weight. That's a condensed version of what I got from him. I don't look like a model, in case you're wondering. I can fit through the doors of everything I need to fit through nicely, but, when he met me, I was 20. So I would say at this point I've put on at least that much. But I was worried. I knew I couldn't mention it. He rode his bike, he exercised, he walked with the dog. On the surface, it looked okay. And he wasn't going to any doctors. He was very proud of that. And this week he fell over dead, leaving his wife adrift because she's disabled from her surgery and recovery. I went to the hospital because, I didn't expect that there wouldn't be so many other people there, but there were not many. A neighbor, his very, very, very elderly mother and her partner, and his wife, who's delightful, but again, has some challenges. And we were there keeping his body going because she had decided, because they're kind people at heart, that she wanted him to be an organ donor. Here's the thing you may not know, because I didn't know it. Life support doesn't guarantee that your body will persevere until they find the recipients. They had a donor lined up for each kidney, and they were hoping to keep him stable until morning when they would be able to find a recipient for his liver. And I'd been there about 45 minutes when his blood pressure crashed. And here's the thing you may not know. Of course, we have doctors who listen, nurses who listen, health professionals who listen. So you will probably know this, but if your blood pressure goes low, even if they're giving you oxygen, breathing for you, every kind of medicine, your organs become unusable, which, of course, if you think about it, makes perfect sense. If your blood pressure's low, then you're not moving your blood around to your body, and the organs of your body start to sustain damage. And it was so hard to watch as all the people waiting to honor him with his gift slowly walked away, leaving his wife, his mother, her companion, me, and the neighbor. They could still help a few people with his corneas and his tissue. There will be burned people who will heal. There will be people who will be able to see. And it was clear to me, although I can't prove it, that he died of raw fury. So furious. And being stubborn, unwilling to go for a basic physical, unwilling, there are a lot of things we're told all the time. Half the public service announcements you hear are about how you need to get checked for one thing or another. You need to be checked for blood sugar. You need to be checked for your heart. You need to be checked. And there is this idea amongst the Trump-supporting, Kennedy-loving, anti-vax, anti-science people that if you look fine, you must be fine. Why be screened for anything? You are a righteous person in pursuit of a righteous cause, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the great, before she was a debatably competent congressperson, she was one of those fitness people in one of those kind of cult gyms. That was her religion. And now it's hating everybody who's not exactly aligned with her. But, she was fit. I don't know the last time she's been to a doctor. I'm not her inner circle, but there was this idea that to be fit, to look good, that was the seal of health, and you didn't need to do anything else. And they're compounded with the fury, the anger, which everybody will tell you is terrible for your health. And anybody, even Kennedy would say, I think, maybe, that if you walk around furious, your blood pressure goes up. Everything is stressed. Why do you think people go to yoga? It's not because you get to wear cool pants. It's because people feel like they need a place to unwind their anxiety and focus on being calm and handling their lives with peace and compassion at the center of their personality. And I say this as someone who kind of enjoys her stress. I do. But I get, I have an outlet. Here I am with you. Do you know such a person? It doesn't have to be about Trump. Someone who's just like, they're wrought up all the time. They're furious all the time. And is it political? And do you worry about them? I would love to hear from you. We have a text line, also the phone line. It's the Credo mobile phone and text line. The number is 773-763-9278. Credo Mobile, a progressive phone company that is better for all people and the planet. And probably they're more relaxed over there, I'm guessing. You can visit credomobile.com for details. So I am now unlocking the text line so that I can. I did talk to some friends about this. I have talked to some friends about this. And we're actually all kind of worried. We're stressed now. The liberals are stressed now. So what are we doing with our stress? What are we doing? What are we doing as we watch our rights being eroded? What are we doing as we see people voting against their own best interests? And by the way, I agree with, I don't know if you listened to the other shows here, but our prior host was talking about how, I don't know, it just flew right out of my what I was going to say. But we do healthy things with our anger and our stress. We give money if we have money to give. Oh, I know what he was saying. You should have. He was talking about his maggot friend. We have to have some friends who aren't like us and maybe aren't as angry as my friend. But we need to have some friends who are not like us so that we can understand. There's a guy in my life. I worked with him years ago. He's a nice guy. He's actually in my book. If you're familiar with the book, it's She Said What? A Life on the Air. And it was published by one of Chicago's great indie presses. So I think it's at the Chicago Public Library. I'm not insisting that you spend any money. But this is the guy that when I had to go to country bars and basically they would give me T-shirts to give away and free beer. That's not a good combination when you're 20-something and tiny. This is the guy who would stop the drunken patrons of these country bars from literally picking me up and carrying me off. He's a nice guy. He really is. But he's a big Trump supporter. And I would have to say he's not an academic. How's that for diplomatic? He's not someone who's going to get a Guggenheim Award or a MacArthur grant anytime soon. He's a regular guy and he is unaware of his privilege. He's really unaware of his privilege. And mind you, when the tariffs first kicked off and the stock market crashed, he was furious. He wanted Trump impeached. He wanted people to call Congress. And I actually noted politely, because he's on my socials, I said, the Democratic districts, we don't have to call our Congress people. You, who have elected a Republican in your district, why don't you call your congressperson? Why don't you call her? We're not in her district, but you are. If you're a Republican Trump voter and now you want him impeached, call your congressperson. we all need to call our congresspersons. And when the stock market recovered, well, Trump was a genius again. And he just wrote a whole... I actually had a little conversation with him on Facebook about some of Trump's domestic cuts and how much, if you were a farmer and you were part of the program that had your produce and crops purchased by the government in order to provide free meals to children in schools. And by the way, a significant number of those free meals are not to what the right-wing maggots imagine. It's not just a bunch of folks in cities. Most rural districts also supply free, healthy meals to the kids. And we've changed the rules in many districts so that no one is shamed. Everybody gets free meals. I know in Chicago, the way it was when my kids were in public school here, if more than a certain number of kids in your school would be eligible for free meals, everybody's meal was free. So no one would be embarrassed. And I know Minnesota has passed rules about that too. Because kids, if they don't have money for a healthy lunch, a hot lunch, and the parents really counted on this. And because Trump cut the program, it was going to go away. Bad for the farmers, bad for the kids. And I wrote this nicely to my Trump-loving friend, and he wrote back, if you can't afford to feed your children, you shouldn't have them. If you can't afford to feed your children, you shouldn't have them. And I didn't want to argue with him anymore because I felt he had expressed himself on social media as exactly who he was. Someone with no compassion for children who had no say in whether they were born or not and are now hungry, and a healthy meal they get every day is at school. This is the kind of excrement that these folks in D.C. just voted for. They just voted to punish children and punish veterans and punish seniors and punish anybody who isn't like this other friend of mine who all of a sudden loves Trump again because his stock portfolio recovered. People with on Medicaid should get out and work. So, again, it's good to know someone who believes this. It's good to know how they feel. It's good to know what they think. You should have at least one Trump-supporting friend. If you're a progressive or just a mainline Democrat, you should make a point of listening so you know what they're worried about, so you know who they don't care about. I wrote politely back with some data from, admittedly, they have skin in the game, the American Healthcare Association, pointing out that most people in nursing homes, a big percentage of people in nursing homes, I think it's like a third, I would have to look it up, are on Medicaid. And that most people all their lives did not have access to excellent health care as my friend does, as I do. We have union jobs. We have union health care. We live in a major metropolitan area where you can have your pick of 4 different teaching hospitals and a whole bunch of other excellent hospitals. But most people don't have that. And you have to be able to pick your head up and look around beyond your privilege. And this guy posted that he didn't begrudge Bezos his millions and he didn't begrudge Elon Musk his billions because they worked for it. At a certain point, it doesn't matter. Bezos isn't going to work any harder. It's just scorekeeping. It's just private part waving. That's all it is. At a certain point, you don't need any more billions, but there are people who do need basics. And it's not about whether you worked hard or whether you earned it. It's about what kind of a human being you are. So you need to make sure you have at least one friend who writes things like, Medicare people should work. And you want to say, and I did say to this particular friend, 20 years ago, the average life expectancy was 75, and now it's 80. And a lot of people live to be older. And 20, 30 years ago, you couldn't get your heart valve replaced. Nobody got their hip replaced. You didn't get your knee replaced. You just stayed home and did the best you could in terrible pain with you hoped your family taking care of you until you died at 70 or 75. That's not even old anymore. So these people worked hard, maybe used their bodies and were hard on them. Firefighters, police officers, people who work road crews, people who are lines people who use their bodies and use them hard, and they plan to retire at maybe 65 or 70 with 5 years to go, and now they're 90 and they don't have any more money, and you're going to say to those people, you get nothing? Go get a job? Seriously? Okay. It's enough of that. So this message from Henry: your mom is expensive. Yes. That's a good point. Your mom is expensive. Again, the phone number here, texting is great. We love texting. The Credo mobile phone and text line, 773-763-9278. It's a great way to get in, even if I'm talking to somebody. That way I can get your views and get them to the person. And in a moment, we're gonna take a lighter tone. Although the topic was serious, the best way, I think, for people to really take in information is to open their hearts when you laugh. When you laugh, somehow you become able to take in information. So in a moment, an absolutely hilarious and yet deeply, deeply moving play, You Will Get Sick. Coming up, artistic director Audrey Francis, director from the Steppenwolf Theater. In just a moment, we are WCPT Radio. It is Edwin Eisendrath's show. I'm Turi, in for Edwin, live, local, and progressive.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
It's just about 1:33. I'm Turi Ryder, in for Edwin, and I recommend. I couldn't give a more unreserved recommendation for a show at Steppenwolf, which I don't think I've ever seen a real stinkeroony, maybe once, show at Steppenwolf, maybe once, but mostly the shows range from B+ to A+, and this one was an A++. To use a very elementary sort of report card on it. And I'll tell you why in a moment, but I'd like you to meet director and co-artistic director of Steppenwolf, Audrey Francis. Welcome, Audrey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure, and I know it's a holiday weekend, so I'm extra pleased that you could join us. Tell me maybe you should describe the show as you see it, and then I'll tell you from the audience chair what struck me about it.
Okay, this is a show that is a very unlikely, absurd world full of wonder and curiosity, where two people form an unlikely friendship, given a limited amount of time. And in that limited amount of time, they realized how good it feels to just meet someone where they're at, what it means to help someone get sick in the most hilarious way possible, and also what it means to one dream in the most beautiful way possible. So I always say it's a weird world where an unlikely friendship forms, and there's a nice reminder of sometimes we're trying so hard not to die that we forget to live.
That's a good one. And especially, I don't know if you heard the earlier part of the show. I watched somebody be extubated this week, and that was not easy. Yeah, I've not been there for that. And furthermore, just to catch you up, he was going to be an organ donor, and the body crashed like just before they were going to take him. And so, yeah, it was awful. So that's another angle on You Will Get Sick. But it's a joyful show in a way. And one of there were so many things that hit me about it. So let me just give you a couple. One was the unwillingness to say things out loud that are deeply, deeply troubling or meaningful to you, and yet you're unable to articulate them or unwilling to articulate them. And I think in this time, there's a lot that we're afraid to say out loud. So not just about our bodies and getting sick, but people are afraid to articulate their political views. They're afraid to articulate their gender or sexual preferences. A lot of that in the show is just sort of matter of fact. Could you talk a little bit about bodies and how we are, what we're willing to share about them and what we're not, and our concept of privacy a little bit?
Oh, that's so great. Yes, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about our bodies or how healthy we are, how well we're doing, a lot of that has to do with how we feel it's going to be received, whether we feel like it's going to bring on shame, whether the other person is going to feel burdened. Something I'm realizing is that so many people share a commonality where they don't want to be a burden to anyone. And so there's a real vulnerability in saying, hey, I'm not perfect. And one of the cast members, Namir Smallwood, had a beautiful quote where he said, this play makes it feel like talking about your body and talking about getting sick is actually a beginning instead of an end.
That's absolutely spot on. Tell me, I mean, I don't want to characterize some of the hilarious parts of it. Maybe you could, and then I'll layer onto that. What are some of the moments to you where you just went, I'm not going to get through this, it's too funny? And I should add that Amy Morton is the main hilarious character. And I would go watch her wash dishes, really. I would go to anything she was doing. But tell me about that element of humor and what were the standout moments for you?
Yes, well, just Amy and Namir together are such an unlikely and hilarious couple of friends. And so I kept saying, you guys are like a buddy comedy. And I think the thing that's so funny that was hard to get through the rehearsal process is the irreverence, both in which Noah handles the content and the way Amy and Namir also handle it. And then you've got Cliff Chamberlain coming in as a bit of a magician, right? The play has a lot of wonder, a lot of elements of The Wizard of Oz. And so there was just these like magical moments of irreverence and boldness that no one takes care of each other in this play about caretaking. And then it's all under the guise of transactionality. So like Amy actually won't help Namir unless he gives her money. And you find out what the money is for later in the play, and it's just so wild and funny and absurd. And we always said in the rehearsal, I said, you're walking a tightrope between hyper absurdity and hyper realism, and they're doing it with such agility and irreverence that it's pretty captivating.
Would I be giving too much away if I said not what Amy's taking the money for, not what her character, and none of the characters are named, so you have to sort of pick how you wanted to. How do you describe each character? Because they don't get names, as I recall.
Right, that's right. They're numbered 1 to 5. And I guess we describe it via the relationship, but I always just said Amy, Namir, and then boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, waiter, sister, coworker, because these two people keep meeting similar characters in their lives. And as Namir goes on, everyone who comes into this absurd world is a reminder of someone he loved, someone who has impacted him. And it's just such a beautiful thing if you start to like realize the clock is ticking, how many people impact your lives in such fast ways. So it's like the beauty that I took from this piece is like, you have no idea how you're impacting someone's day. So when in doubt, choose kindness and choose joy.
I have to say that the Wizard of Oz theme, I've now seen. Charles Randolph Wright did a play in San Francisco years ago, and he's a friend of mine, and he did a play, Holding History. I'm trying to remember the first name of the title of the play that also used a Wizard of Oz theme. And I guess I wouldn't be giving much away to say that one of the characters has a love, a deep, abiding, I want to be part of the Wizard of Oz. And it's so blatantly absurd for this character to imagine, I really will be careful here, themselves in a production of the Wizard of Oz that you just fall over. I mean, when you find out
100%.
The person 100%. Wants to be... Can I say the character the person wants to be? Would that be all right?
Go for it. There's only 2 weeks left to the run,
okay.
So I think it's good.
The person wants to be Dorothy. Imagine your great-grandfather wanted to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. It's about like that. But there's I don't even know but they will love it. They want it. And the idea that you can want something so desperately that you can't even see what a bizarre idea it is, I think is one of the more appealing pieces of the whole show. It's part of the magic. And also the idea of going home. Because all through Wizard of Oz, all Dorothy wants, she says, is to go home, and everybody in the Wizard of Oz is someone in her real life. The other hilarious part of the show for me was the acting class. And that's a lot of body work and staging work. Would you talk a little bit about how it ends up that there is an acting class and what goes on there so people will go, this I've got to see?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the acting class is such a beautiful homage to people who love theater and who believe in the magic of live art with a living, breathing body on stage. And so I think Noah did something really brilliant because Namir's character is trying to feel alive in his body. So he goes to this acting class with Amy, who's trying to be an actor, and she's taken this class that's called Body as Source, where you learn to live inside your body. And Amy's terrible at it, so she brings Namir to the class to be her acting partner. But what you find is there's just these people who are willing to dream and willing to try. So it's very funny, but at the root of it, it's about human beings connecting in the same room together and believing in dreaming and believing in living. And in doing that, we realize, wow, I better do that more often because I don't know what tomorrow could bring.
That is a different way of looking at it than I had, and I'm way more pessimistic about the world than you are.
Sure.
I love it that these people hope and dream, and part of me wants to say, darling, someone should tell you now. So someone needs to break this news to you right now. I have friends who've wanted to do stand-up, and you're like, you're not funny. Someone needs to tell you you're not funny. And you must, as the artistic director, co-artistic director of Steppenwolf, you must meet a lot of people who think that they could do what you do or that they could do what the actors do. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what is your thought when someone comes up and says, I think that I would be all my friends tell me I should go into I'm sure you get the spiel, right? I get it for talk radio. I get it because I wrote a book. There's some very funny author who wrote a thing about all the people who come up to her in parties and tell them they have a novel. What happens when, I don't even know a polite response anymore when people tell me they've written a book. I just don't even, my response is, well, then go ahead and get it published for God's sakes. Don't come and talk to me about it. But what happens in your brain when people go up to you, go, you're the artistic director of the Steppenwolf? All my friends say I should be. What happens in your soul? Seriously, now I want to know.
Yes, I feel like it can be soul crushing because it means that nobody understands the amount of hours and work and blood, sweat, and tears that you have to put in to being, whatever anybody is. It would be the same as if I went to a brain surgeon or an attorney or, whatever, a painter, and said, I was really good at, my handwriting's really good. So there's an assumption of ease to any sort of industry when you get to the highest level. That said, being in the artistic industry, it's subjective, right? So if I'm really honest, I've seen some horrifically untalented people rise to the top. And so
Care to name one? You want to name any? Come on. Let's hear one.
I wish I could, but my name either escaping me. No, I guess I just see some movie stars and stuff that I'm like, they're only paying attention to how they look. They're not actually even living through anything. So I feel, my heart dies a little bit, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, but who am I? I mean, I don't know. You could go and Steven Spielberg could think you're amazing tomorrow. So
what do you say to those? You say, I wish you the best of luck. By the way, I have a name for the thing that you just described, if you'd like it. It's my shorthand. I call it I can fly the plane syndrome.
Yeah.
Let me fly the plane. I fly all the time. What is to it? You come up, you go down. I must have flown 1,000 times in my life. What's the difference? You turn left when you walk in the door as opposed to turning right when you walk in the door. Let me fly the plane.
Exactly.
Especially in this political climate, when a whole lot of white guys with Ivy League degrees are dissing the Ivy League that got them hired for their jobs in the first place.
Yep.
And by the way, I wish there was some way to revoke people's Ivy League degrees instead of just picking on the people who are coming down the road after you. But there really is this mood here of anyone can do this. What's to it? And the good people always make it look easy. If you go to a ballet, it just looks like these people fly through the air, and you don't see them at the bar. You don't see their feet that look like they've been mangled by some horrible machine. You don't know the years of work and training and time that go into it. So I kind of sort of think I could do this. All my friends think. Steve Dahl. Do you know who Steve Dahl is?
I don't.
Oh, he was a big, huge radio personality and number one in his town for decades. And now he does a podcast. But he used to do this thing. Oh, you think you can do this? And I would plug in acting. Great. See you Monday. See you Tuesday. See you Wednesday. You going to show up Thursday? Great. So, there is a profound disrespect for what it takes to do this work. And yet at the same time, circling back to your point about the acting class, it's kind of charming that people want to try. And at least the fact that they're in a class means that they understand there's some work involved.
Exactly. That's exactly how we talked about it in the rehearsal room. It's like, this is a room where people are trying and they're doing the work to continue to try. And that's, like, to me, the most moving thing. It's just people trying and admitting that they have work to do to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's charming. Yeah, exactly. That's the moment of that acting class, which is hilarious. I mean, people, I'm going to give one thing away, where the disembodied voice of the acting teacher tells people they should move like lions, and they get through doing that, and she says, okay, now move like a tiger. And you're like, the whole audience falls over, like, what's the difference? But they try, God bless them. They really, really try.
They do with such earnesty, you know. That element of, like, wonder and earnestness and home and what does it mean to try and what does it mean to make friends is such a beautifully wondrous and earnest saying about this play that I find hilarious, because we're laughing and dying. Yes, well, there is that, and then there are something that Steppenwolf doesn't usually do a lot of, special effects. You want to talk about some of that, the magic of the special effects, the lighting? Yeah. Is that in the script, or did you just come to that? There's some stuff that's in the script. There's some stuff like, the fires kind of seem to disappear into air. The rest, Noah, the playwright, he hit the look. I wrote this thinking that it would be done in a black box. And and I wrote no stage directions so that everything could be said, so that there didn't need to be any effects. So really the truth is that any production could be as huge as it wants to be or as minimal as it wants to be. So a lot of that was our team at Steppenwolf figuring out what our version is. And I think we had a special effects designer. I think our set, our lighting, our costumes team, our sound design, we all so hard to figure out, like, what are the rules of our version? What is the element? What is the ratio of wonder to realism? And how do we keep it really honest and very subtle, and so that it wouldn't undermine the final moment, the one that is like the biggest gesture of the entire play, that kind of, like, hopefully elicits the biggest, moment of wonder. It took so much hard work, and I will say that I was humbled by the special effects and the wonder element in this play. They were magnificent. If you're just joining us, we are talking with Audrey Francis. She is co-artistic director of Steppenwolf Theater. They have a show up right now with an unlikely title called You Will Get Sick. And if I were just retitling it about the experience, I would say you will laugh till, if you were drinking milk, it comes out your nose. And at the same time, you will have an experience that really moves you and gives you an appreciation for home and people. At the very beginning, you've described that it's going to be an unlikely friendship, and I think in one of your promotional videos, so I'm not giving anything away, this young man who can't speak of his illness puts, like, one of those "I will cut your grass" signs on a light pole, and with the little thing you tear off, that he wants to tell you something, and he'll pay you to listen, and so. Right away, of course, there's this concept of I will pay you to be on the other end of the phone. What do we know usually is that it's phone sex, right? Mm-hmm. So that premise is immediately blown up, and just getting it out of the way,
Namir says, I don't date women. When she says, like, what is this about? It's some kind of, I don't date women. That's not, and you erase it. You just take it right off the table. And so what we're left with is two human souls who want different things from each other, but definitely not sex. So what do you, it's clear that the Amy Morton character wants money, but what else do you think she wants?
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about this. It's such a beautiful thing because I think what they both need, but they're reluctant to admit, is a friend, and a friend who lets them be exactly who they are at this moment in their life. And so as long as she keeps showing up, offering help, and as long as he keeps paying, they can keep this as a bit superficial and transactional. But as time goes on, they start to see each other more, and they start to reveal more about themselves. And I feel like there are a million different layers of intimacy, and so many of them are not sexual. And that's what this play really beautifully explores, I think, with two people who don't know how to say, you're my friend and I love you, and now I don't want you to go because you're the only one who's let me really be me. And that kind of intimacy, especially as adults and aging adults, finding new friends who like you with who you are in this moment in your life, and who don't find your dreams or your illness as a burden, is a wondrous thing.
Oh yeah, they only laugh at you a little bit. With love. They only laugh at you a little bit, and with love. I mean, it wouldn't sound accurate if nobody thought that any of the things that go on is a little bit absurd. I mean, I think, and I could be wrong, you may not have thought that any of the characters recognize in each other that there's a bit of absurdity in their efforts, but they do seem to call it out in each other gently and kindly. With the additional offer of money, because Amy will only be the friend if she gets $5, $10, $20, and Namir will only keep talking if she stays, if she's willing. And he goes to this acting class because he's willing. And in the end, he's really willing. I don't recall. You know the playwright, of course. Was this written perhaps in the time of AIDS, where you got AIDS and then you died and you couldn't tell your family necessarily what you were dying of? I don't know that.
He wrote this in 2018, 7 years ago. But what he has specifically said is he doesn't want to identify the illness, because he says everybody will put their own personal thing onto it, whether they have a family member. You know, I've had certain people say, oh my gosh, I think it's MS, I think it's AIDS, it's clearly cancer, you know, whatever it is. And everybody kind of puts their own thing on it, which he said he loves, because, you know, and AIDS is a big one that comes up a lot.
Yeah, well, the characters aren't named, and the disease from You Will Get Sick is never named. But I did live in San Francisco at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and it was amazing how many people had to really work up the courage to tell their families they were ill. And you would see people coming in from, you know, the license plates from Oklahoma and Nebraska and the Castro, and elderly people, or what I thought was elderly then, they're my age, getting out of cars and kind of goggle-eyed at the whole scene in the Castro. And it sort of became clear that there was a meeting going on of people who really loved other people and hadn't known anything about their lives much, or had disapproved of their lives. There doesn't seem to be any disapproval in You Will Get Sick. Did you think at some point it would be realistic for some character to say, well, you know, I'm not going to accept that? I'm thinking of the scene with the sister, where I defied expectations. When she's informed of her brother's illness, you expect that she's going to react completely differently than she does. How did you take in that scene, and what were your main points when you were directing it?
Yeah, it's interesting to watch sometimes how people can so quickly center themselves in your experience, that all of a sudden it has become about what she is going to do and what she needs to do. And, you know, my husband worked in hospice for 6 years, and it really is a very interesting study of human behavior when families see that someone is sick. and how all of a sudden it becomes about, and this could also be an American thing because of our healthcare system and because of the way that we, live our lives for the future. And a lot of times, people just leave their parents in retirement homes and don't go see them again. So it's interesting. And what we talked about is like, this is why he was afraid to tell you, because you're making it about you and what you need to do and how you can't watch another person get sick and how you're going to hire somebody. You're already going to outsource the care. And what she also does in that scene is the sister ends up taking the agency of the sick person away, when that's the last thing that you should do to someone who's already, their body is betraying them. The thing I think that's most important is to remember that person is allowed to have a modicum of agency in their experience.
What I think you also don't miss and what that you really acknowledge is that it's exhausting, because the character mentions another family member that they did care for. And I think just that quick little nod of this can wear you out makes the play feel really real. And as you pointed out, with our current healthcare system, and just having watched a Trumpanista friend of mine post about the Medicaid cuts and how people should work, I think there is very little understanding of what's going to be involved in taking care of someone who's sick. If you don't have the resources to just have somebody there all the time. I mean,
oh my God. Yeah.
I just watched, it was about 3 years ago, a friend of mine, I was her power of whatever. And it took a team of, I guess there were 6 radio ladies. We all did something, but none of us could have done it by ourselves. None of us. And
exactly. I
think the play really comforts people who have that feeling that they're going to be overwhelmed and there's only so much they can do. When this production ends, what are you going to remember most about it?
I'm going to remember how beautifully the cast, creative team of designers and playwright and our staff at Steppenwolf, everybody met this play with such creativity and innovation, because I think everybody really cared about it. I think everyone really cared about this play's statement. So what you're seeing up there's a lot of creative DNA from a lot of artists, but also our staff. And I'm also going to remember just how much fun we had making it. The group of people and that cast on stage, to me, they're like a director's dream. I really didn't have to do very much. Noah was sitting in that room and he said, I've never seen the play done like this before. I don't know if this is a Steppenwolf thing or if this is an Audrey thing. And I said, it's a Steppenwolf thing. It's also a Chicago thing, because it's like we really believe in bringing who we are as human beings to the work. And so what was happening in that room was so funny and so smart and so moving. But there was also an immense spirit of generosity and care of like, just be somebody's friend. Just be good to people. That's it. Don't judge. Don't burden. Be kind.
We're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there. But yes, you're right. It is a Chicago play. And I should also point out that you have your 20 for 20 policy, right? If somebody you want to quickly just name it, how it works if people want to go, but they're maybe a little low on funds.
Absolutely. All you have to do is call the box office. I think it's at 11 a.m. You call the box office at 312-335-1650, and the first 20 people to call get $20 tickets.
That's great. I love that about Steppenwolf. Thank you, Audrey Francis. I can't wait to see what you do next. I'm deeply appreciative.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do.
It's Audrey Francis, co-director of at Steppenwolf and director of You Will Get Sick. You should see it.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
3 minutes after 2 o'clock, I'm Turi Ryder in for Edwin. I'll be in for Joan on Monday, so we get to spend some time together. You can listen to The Big Picture live every Saturday from 1 to 4 Central here at 8:20 a.m., or you can use TuneIn from heartlandsignal.com, or just ask Alexa to play WCPT. I got a text saying, I want to share this with my friends in Silicon Valley. It's all archived on your favorite podcast site. I can't think of a podcast site that we're not on. So if you go to your podcast site and you look for WCPT, we're there. We're there. I promise you. It doesn't take long for these shows to get archived, and you can text or call your friends and say, hey, you missed something. I want you to hear this. And then you can go to their house and stand over them until they listen. That's what we like. We like people with an intrepid spirit. Speaking of intrepid spirits, there is a group of folks who work in this country, men and women. They work hard. They drive commercial trucks. And I was shocked to find out that holiday, when you think about it, again, so logical, who thinks about it? That this is a weekend when thievery of commercial vehicles, not the vehicles themselves, the contents of their trucks, is at its peak. And so I read about this in an article in the Commercial Trucking Journal, and I thought I would invite one of the authors from that journal to speak about the subject, because, it's news to me. If it's news to me, it might be news to you. So I'd like you to meet Matt Cole, journalist. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Turi. How are you?
I'm having a good time. I love this. I call this my Goldilocks job. Not too big, not too small, just right. So when I read this article, can you detail for me what happens on holiday weekends, how it happens that people can just get wild and get into a truck and help themselves to whatever? How does that even work?
Absolutely. Well, cargo theft it's been a major issue in the trucking industry for pretty much as long as it's existed. But, during holiday weekends, trucks sit longer than typically because, shipping and receiving facilities are closed on Friday, for example, this weekend, and possibly even longer than that as people take time off around the holidays. Staffing is shorter. So, trucks are sitting for longer, and oftentimes they're loaded, and it presents a prime opportunity for thieves to be able to break into those trucks and take what's in there.
Not to coach people to do this, but are there people who already know the drill? Like this is their livelihood, as it were, sneaking into... Where are these trucks typically parked?
A lot of times it's at truck stops or, anywhere that you see trucks parked, rest areas, anywhere that trucks are typically parked. And there is, it's organized crime. That's really what it boils down to. There's crime syndicates, more or less, that prey on these trucks year round. And it's only gotten worse in the last few years, not just on holiday weekends, but, all year round.
I'm trying to imagine the logistics of this, because what you're explaining is that the truck has to be sitting there likely for more than a day or two because it can't unload. And then there's someone who knows what's in the truck, which you can't typically tell. Do these organized crime rings, do they know what's in the truck typically? Or are they just kind of opening up trucks going, nope, don't want that, aha? Or how does that work?
A lot of times they do know. They will. They watch certain locations, for where the truck gets loaded. They know what gets sent out of those facilities, and a lot of times they'll follow the trucks.
Really?
And, they'll wait for them to be parked for extended periods of time, and that's when they'll take that opportunity. But one thing that's grown in the last few years is something called strategic theft, where it's not even the physical breaking and entry of a truck, but it's identity theft. They steal the identity of either a company where the freight is supposed to be going, or they steal the identity of a trucking company, and they redirect that freight to go where they want it to go instead of where it's supposed to go.
I'll be damned. I never heard of this in my life before. I feel like the biggest ignoramus, and all truckers know this, right? And the rest of us just kind of blithely expect that when we show up at Best Buy, there's our TV set. And we never understand that probably a good share of the cost is keeping, in New York, it was always Vinny from bringing you a TV for free that fell off the back of a truck. We don't know. Where does this stuff end up? On eBay or someplace else that we should know to avoid?
I think they have their own networks that they run it through. And, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure the end, the last frontier there of where things wind up before they're sold to the public or how that works. But, it's a major issue in trucking, and it's something that It's grown exponentially really since COVID, 2020, 2021. It's really taken off.
Is there some sort of connection that I'm missing? Why since COVID, where the thieves had jobs and then they lost them, or what made this happen, do you think?
I believe that was probably part of it. And there's, there's been an increase in the amount of freight moved by truck. Trucks carry, I think the last figure I saw is something like 70 to 75% of the nation's freight. So, there's just ample opportunity out there. If this is what, if that's what you choose to do, I wouldn't say it's not hard, but there's just so many opportunities out there. Trucks are everywhere, as anybody who's on the road can attest to.
Sure. Well, and of course, it's like the Jesse James joke. Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. So
that's right.
That's the old one. I remember a few years ago, there was a lot of conversation about stolen cars getting shipped to other countries. And I also remember that in California, there was an effort from the guy who's now, I believe, the Attorney General of the state, and I spoke with him on the air, to make iPhones and other smartphones inoperable if you called in and reported them stolen, so that they couldn't, the phone would become a brick, and there was no point in stealing it because it would be totally inoperable the minute somebody called and said, my phone is stolen. And I'm wondering if there are any kind of high-tech and you could do it with a car too, I think was the effort. I don't know if they ever got that done, but is there any security effort going on now in the trucking industry to in some way make it just unworkable to open up a truck and steal the contents? Is there any kind of technical solution to this?
More and more trucks, the majority of trucks on the road today are tracked with GPS. Electronic logging devices have tracking in them. And a lot of times companies will put trackers in the freight itself. So, if a driver or somebody else discovers that their trailer has been tampered with, they can report it to authorities, and there has been some headway made there as far as being able to track down those shipments before it's too late.
Does law enforcement seem to acknowledge the seriousness of this crime wave?
Oh, absolutely. There's organizations out there that are specifically geared towards solving cargo theft in the trucking industry. It's a major problem, and the FBI has been involved. Other major police organizations, law enforcement organizations. So it's a major issue that they're aware of all across the country.
It was fascinating when you just informed me that there's a sort of a hacking that can go on where trucks are just redirected to some warehouse that has nothing to do with where it was originally supposed to go. Have you spoken with truckers who, like, halfway through having their truck unloaded, noticed something was wrong? Or how does that play out? Do they just drive away and never know until somebody calls later and says, where are my Cuisinarts?
A lot of times that's how it happens. The trucking company itself, they usually go where they're told to go. And, if somebody gets in the middle of that and they think that they're going where that freight is supposed to go, they deliver it, and then, later on they hear from who was supposed to receive it. It's like, where's my stuff? And, hey, we delivered it on this date. They've got the paperwork, and it turned out to be a misdirection.
And so what happens? Somebody just rented a storage locker and now they're gone and you can't find them. I would think that on the other end, you would be able to figure out who took the stuff. Where are they unloading it that nobody can come after the thieves?
A lot of times it's warehouses, and they would look the same as any other warehouse that they would be delivering to. It doesn't look out of the ordinary, to the truck driver. But a lot of these crime rings are they originate overseas. And so once the freight gets to where it's going, they've got their networks that quickly move it out of there, and a lot of times it's long gone before anybody realizes it's actually missing.
This is fascinating to those of us who are new to this whole topic. Do the drivers get blamed? I mean, has there been, or is it pretty clear in the industry that this has nothing to do with the men and women who are driving the trucks?
Usually the driver doesn't get blamed. I mean, there are some drivers that have been involved and they, intentionally take it where it's not supposed to go. But by and large, it's, the truck drivers are the victims just as much as, the people whose freight is actually being stolen. So, the trucking companies and the truck drivers themselves are, there's been a lot of push for them to become more aware of their surroundings and, to add additional tracking and high security locking devices on the trailers, things besides a padlock, something that could be more easily cut with, handheld tools. There's a lot of efforts going on to try to stamp this down.
About how much, and by the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Matt Cole, journalist, who writes for, forgive me, I know it's the CCJ. Can give me the full name of what? Commercial Carrier Journal? Is that what the official one? Okay, the Commercial Carrier Journal, which, as you might have deduced, carries content and is dedicated to the commercial trucking industry. So I was just going to ask you, and it flew out of my head there for a second. These high security measures, they must be expensive, and the loss of the contents of these trucks. Is there an estimate for how much this is adding to the cost of our goods every year? Does anyone have those numbers?
I'm sure there's some figures out there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I can tell you though that. For the July 4th weekend, they consider the July 4th holiday period to be between the 1st and the 7th, and that's often the time period when trucks may be parked longer than normal, like we talked about. But one of the firms that tracks a lot of this stuff called CargoNet, $7.5 million worth of freight is what's been lost just in the last 5 years during that 7-day period.
Wow.
So, it's a very sizable number, and that's 1 week's worth. You extrapolate that over the whole year, and it's a major problem in trucking. That
it does, and one in which many of us would be unaware of. I know in our industry, the people I know who work on the TV side of this business have had huge problems getting their equipment stolen, and they quit labeling a lot of the news trucks because they just felt like they were targets for the very expensive cameras and the very expensive communications equipment. And then they started putting tags inside the cameras and just to sort of cut it down. But it was a danger in Oakland, California. I think there was a whole news crew. Somebody was killed. A bunch of people were injured. Is it any kind of danger to the drivers physically if they run into somebody doing this? Has that happened? How dangerous is this physically for the people in the profession?
Often the truck drivers aren't affected. Every now and then, if they catch somebody in the act, there may be some physical altercation there, but the thieves are trying to get in and out without being detected, and the less involvement they have with, any other human out there, the better off they'll be as far as what they're doing. So typically they don't try to attack the drivers or do anything like that. They're trying to get in and out as quickly and quietly as they can to ensure or to better their chances of getting away.
So it's kind of middle of the night, unload your truck here, thank you very much, goodbye, and then by morning somebody else has shown up and moved all this stuff out of the warehouse. And you said it involves overseas syndicates. Which countries do you suspect are most heavily involved in this sort of thievery?
I've heard a lot of, a lot of it's based in Eastern European countries. But again, I don't know for sure. That's generally the area that I've heard about, though.
Well, that's where a lot of the high-tech hacking is coming out of, and I'm not surprised to hear that. And after all, if it's electronics, which I would imagine is a popular target, that stuff originates in Asia, a lot of it. So the incentive would be for Eastern Europe to be the end recipient of this sort of cargo. That makes sense. Are there, now that tariffs are coming in, are there things that you think are going to increasingly become targets for commercial carrier thievery?
I don't know if there's going to be specific commodities, but, with the threat of tariffs potentially coming into play, companies have been shifting around, the way they've been doing things, trying to stock up on things that may have tariffs. And so, the longer those things sit, even if it's in a warehouse, the thieves know about that. And so even outside of the truck, the longer those things sit in a warehouse somewhere, the bigger of a target they become as well.
Well, I thank you so much for all this insight and the information. It's been eye-opening, I would say, truck opening. And I will not look at a rest stop the same way, thanks to you. And I guess the next time somebody says, oh, yeah, I've got like an eye tag on my luggage, I'm going to think, probably a bunch of stuff that's being trucked across the country has an eye tag in it, too. So thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. And I hope that the industry manages to get away from some of this without having sustained damage. It's been nice of you to share your expertise with us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. That is Matt Cole. He is the journalist of the Commercial Carrier Journal who wrote a piece along with somebody else, whose name is not coming to me right now. And they wrote a wonderful piece about commercial trucking and the losses that are occurring, especially over the 4th of July weekend. Let's go to some of your calls and texts that we're working out here. I'm actually gonna summon Henry here because something has happened. Some technical thing has happened. Henry, come fix. And let's read some texts here. I hope the program is archived. I'd like to share it with friends. Thank you so much. And this one came from a Chicago extension. An argument against driverless trucks. As we heard.
That's an interesting point.
Yes. Matt, you want to talk about that? The argument against driverless trucks?
Well, aside from, from the trucking industry perspective, the potential loss of driver jobs there, having a driver on the truck can definitely, it could potentially be a deterrent for thieves. It's not always, but, I would say that having somebody there might be more of a deterrent than not having anybody there. Is
the driverless trucking lobbying industry trying to explain to the industry how any measures they may be taking? Do they have anything to advertise to folks who might like driverless trucks? To say, look, if you give us a truck with no driver, you'll come out ahead. Have you heard any of them pitching additional safety concerns as something that they offer?
They're definitely claiming that, and there's plenty of driverless testing going on out there. As far as I'm aware, most all of it still has a human inside the truck, but not always at the controls. But there is a safety pitch there, and there's the cost-saving pitch as well as, for, not having to pay a driver. But it's interesting.
They haven't made the argument then that it'll be safer because this truck is so high tech that we can track everything that's in it and know if someone breaks into it. And they haven't loaded up the truck with technology that goes with being driverless so that they can promote that it's harder to rob.
I haven't heard that specific argument, but those trucks definitely have more technology than the standard truck out there. So, and I know for a fact that they would be tracked more heavily than than a truck with somebody driving it. So, just from the safety perspective.
Yeah, one would hope. I mean, it ought to be tracked to the point where if it gets within 10 inches of my car, I'd like somebody to know it.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Matt. It was good to speak with you. We are going to take more of your calls and have more people for you to meet in just a few moments. Whether you missed the Chicago Pride Parade last weekend or were walking next to the WCPT float, you should want to check out the WCPT Pride page. There's still a Pride Parade, I think, going on the South Side this weekend. It's all on our website. You will find the recording of our 3-hour live broadcast and audio compilation of Carrie Dowbin's many walk-by interviews with Illinois elected officials, including Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker. And Maggie, who is our newest employee, is going to be here to talk to you on Joan's show, I think, Tuesday. And she was there riding right behind the mayor, so she'll have a perspective on it. But all of this is available online, a photo gallery that we've been adding to all week. And where can you find it? Well, you'll find it at heartlandsignal.com/WCPT Pride. Again, heartlandsignal.com/WCPT Pride. That's where you can get all the information. Let's check out some of the other texts that you've been sending. And if you want to text us, it's easy to do. It is available thanks to, let me just make sure I get it right. It's available thanks to the Credo mobile phone and text line at 773-763-9278. And I will do this slowly again, 773-763-9278. Credo Mobile provides that because they are a progressive phone company, which is nice for all people and the planet. Visit credomobile.com and get details, and visit us at the Credo Mobile text line and get your message through, even if I'm talking to somebody. This came a little bit earlier today, and it's in response to my Facebook pal, who's a Trump supporter, who said that people shouldn't have children they can't afford to feed, and so he wasn't upset about SNAP benefits being cut to schools, free lunch programs. And what was the other thing? Oh, he said that Medicaid was given to people who should be out there working. And so this text came in to my text line. If you can't afford children, you shouldn't have them. And so this texter suggests that my answer would be, so you support a woman's right to choose? You support comprehensive sex education in schools? By the way, I have to say this particular gentleman probably would. This also possible response. Thank you for this text. So what about the widow whose husband supported the family well but died in a car wreck? She has no work experience, can't find a job. Her children should just starve. Do you or have children? Does your wife work? To this Facebook friend, just to take it to the micro level, thank you for texting those questions. I think, to respond to your point, I think one of the reasons my friend has these views is that he was only briefly married and has no children. So not only does he have a lot of privilege, he also, I don't know if escaped would be the right word, but he also does not have an experience of the same challenges that someone in the situation you described would have. And you've pointed out something very important, person who texted. I think a lot of times the people who are the biggest fans of cutting these sorts of benefits, there are two things. First of all, it's an inability to feel sympathy, empathy, compassion outside your immediate experience. If you don't have children, some people cannot imagine other people's children going hungry. If you have no spouse, you may not be able to imagine your spouse in need of medical help. This was my main objection to Bush II. He went to church. He was what he would have described as a devout Christian. He wanted to have faith-based organizations take over a good portion of the social services. And I think one of the things that he missed somehow was a share of empathy, an ability to put himself in the place of people who hadn't been born to extreme wealth as he was. And there are people in this world, they mean well and they have empathy, but only as far as their circle, only as far as their church, only as far as the people they know. And there seems to be, and I think I am characterizing it accurately, on the right, there seems to be a failure of an ability to imagine. Donald Trump certainly has no capacity to imagine anyone who's not just like him. I mean, in the extreme form, we just call it narcissism. But there are people who are genuinely compassionate and do care about the world and care about others. They just can't imagine who those others might be and how that affects the world. If we all say, well, it's not my problem. I don't know those people. I don't have to do anything for those people. That's what I think you're looking at. Also to the point, here's the third point that it's suggested that I ask my Facebook friend and former coworker. Can you describe for me how you see the school lunchroom? How you see the school lunchroom working when 20 to 30% of the students are going hungry? Would all the well-fed students eagerly share their food? Would the hungry students band together to take the food? Like Lord of the Flies. Would they all just sit and stare at each other? You know, again, an interesting point that you've raised, person who texted, because it hasn't gone so well in schools where there are a few schools that made the news, I think last year and the year before, where there were cuts to school lunch programs. And so the cafeteria workers or the school officials were effectively shaming children who got behind on their school lunch bill. They were not feeding them, or in one case they were feeding them minimally, like the other kids got a hot lunch and these kids would get a peanut butter sandwich, so everybody knew they hadn't paid their lunch bill, as though it was their responsibility to pay it in the first place. And some of the school children can be very cruel. Made fun of these kids, tortured these kids. I don't think some kids are good sharers. I'm sure you raised your kids to be good sharers. But imagine the humiliation of having your sandwich, your peanut butter sandwich, and somebody says, yeah, I can have half of my French fries. Here, you want my apple. And you just want to crawl under the table at that point, I would imagine. 2:31, Edwin Eisendrath show. In a moment, you will be meeting I have so many interesting people for you to meet. We are going to talk about the capitulation of CBS and 60 Minutes to the ransom of Donald Trump. That's coming up. If you haven't heard about it, $16 million. That's what they're going to pay. And to whom? We'll tell you in just a moment. It's 2:31. We are live, local, and progressive, WCPT.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Turi Ryder in for Edwin Eisendrath, Henry at the controls. And on the line, you're going to meet someone who is very well positioned to talk about the fallout from CBS and, for that matter, just about every other major news network at this point, capitulating to the arm-twisting, ransom-holding, gun to the merger, however you want to envision it, of who's escaped? CNN so far, I guess. And most recently, this week, CBS News, CBS 60 Minutes decided to pay $16 million to Donald Trump's re-election fund, his political fund. I want to be accurate here, after legal fees, which I'm guessing were pretty hefty. But what does he care? Who better to speak to this than a Chicago veteran of WBBM, which is CBS News here in town, Ron Gleason. Welcome to WCPT. Thank you for joining us on a holiday weekend.
Hi, Turi. Good to talk to you.
There you go. See, he was on the radio. Ron, what was your first reaction when you read the settlement? What did you think?
Well, I shook my head. I mean, it's very frustrating when there's anything that's going to quell the ability of the quality journalistic press to do their job. And, when you look at 60 Minutes, right, which is an icon within the CBS realm of CBS News, but I mean, I don't know any other portion of the organization that's probably more highly thought of, and you just shake your head because all it can do. Two things. You look at it from two perspectives. One is, in reality, it may not cause any organization to do anything differently. From the standpoint that the journalists who are involved in the process, hopefully, are untouched by the management and legal decisions made above them for a settlement like this. Well, that's what you hope is the case. But there's no guarantee of that. Clearly, in this particular case, it's, a management structure that is concerned about getting a deal done with another organization to sell out, to make Sherry Redstone rich and get out of the business and all that. And so it's really above the journalists that this settlement took place. But it sets a horrible precedent, and it's scary to think that a reputable news organization doing their job in what is a traditional and proper way would have a settlement like this be reached. It's stunning, actually.
I was kind of shocked. I thought, Sherry Redstone, who wants her company to merge with Larry Ellison's kid, I can't think of his name, who's already a super billionaire fan of Trump's, and just to give his kid a company to run and give Sherry Redstone a ton of money, they will sack, they will demolish, they will damage forever the sterling reputation of CBS 60 Minutes. But let's back up a little bit and speak about what actually happened. Do you know the details? I have some. I'm guessing you have more of how this all came down.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know everything about it. I haven't read every little timeline piece. I've been retired for a couple of years, which means I don't have to worry about every detail. But the bottom line is a lot of back and forth. Originally, you're talking billions that the Donald Trump and his lawyers had wanted from CBS, and they were uncomfortable with the interview editing that was done by 60 Minutes. They felt that the interview with Kamala Harris was edited in such a way that it purposely, they said, 60 Minutes was trying to make Kamala Harris look better than she actually was. And so, but here's the problem. All these kind of shows over the years, and look, there are unscrupulous people who will do things for their own gain and take things out of context, and do things that are wrong. But it's hard to believe that would be the case with 60 Minutes. And when you do a television package, there's always editing that gets involved, trying to pare things down, get the basics in there, but you have to, make it fit within the time frame, take the important salient points, have them in there. Everybody who does television interviews, there are what they call cutaways, right? Where you have a shot of the interviewer, nodding their head as if they're listening to what the person is saying. And the point of that is to give you an opportunity to edit to something else that's not exactly 100% immediately after what the person has said before, but the context is all there. And so it's really what it comes down to. It's one saying to the other, you tried to screw me by making somebody else look better than me purposely. And that's just not something 60 Minutes would do.
Well, let's look at some of what you've just said, because I think a lot of people don't know the shot of the anchor or the interviewer nodding their head is to give the editor a second to cut to something different. From what I understand, people who've given interviews, including Leslie Stahl, this kind of editing goes on for every single piece that they do. And I think if you've ever watched C-SPAN, you'd be glad they do it. I mean, you don't want to sit there and listen to somebody rifling through their papers and going, that's a good question. Let me think about that. And that's a good question has become the, of our time. To hear interview guests who've been coached by professionals, exactly. They'll always say, to buy a little time, that's a good question. And do you really want to sit through an interview where every single answer begins with, that's a good question, Helen, or whatever? You don't. And And they only have so much time, or 60 minutes would be 90 minutes. And that might be nice if it were all of the same quality, but it wouldn't be. So that's the first thing that you spoke about. That's an insight for a lot of people. So I'm glad. Thank you for that. And the other thing is, since we're talking about how the sausage is made, promos for the upcoming segments. Can you talk about that for TV and for radio? How you put together something that makes people want to come and hear your show?
Yeah, I mean, look, and you make a good point, Turi, and I say that just to make fun of what you just said.
It was a good question. Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. And here's the thing. We're doing a live interview, but if you wanted to package, say, a 3-minute segment of what may be a 10-minute interview, then you're going to take the best stuff out of it. And then if you want to promote that, you may take a 12-second soundbite and play that and say, you know, so-and-so said this, blah, 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 whatever it is, you know, more of this coming up, or, you know, more details coming up, or anything along those lines. You want to take something fascinating, but don't give the whole thing away, if you will, when you're trying to tease people to hold them through, whether it's a commercial break or a segment that's going to air at the same time the next day or whatever that is. That's just the way it is. And I mean, TV takes it to an extreme, right? When you watch a local TV newscast, you can't go into a commercial break without them telling you 2 things that are coming up. And by the way, one of those may take 2 or 3 segments before they get to it, so that you really hold, if it's interesting enough, they hope that you'll hold through. Well,
and it's normal. It's why people eat their broccoli, so they can get to dessert. I mean, that's just normal. If you listen to these commercials, you get dessert. And so news has had increasingly to position itself as news dessert. And we all expect that now. You made me think, by the way, of not giving the game away. There was a guy, bless his heart, I have to say, as a Midwesterner. He'd been a news person for a long time in a major market, and for some reason, do you remember Paul Harvey at all and his kicker stories? And I think most of you listening will remember this, that there was always, you know, a long story, not really that long, and at the end you'd get the big surprise. So just the one that comes to mind is a blind child who was blinded because of a traumatic incident and went on to become one of the great musicians of our time. And you would listen, and then at the end you would find out who it was. This news guy tried to do what you were describing, but he would always say, coming up, how Ray Charles was the musician that he would give the punchline like every time. It was his specialty. I didn't understand it. It was like watching somebody take a whiz on your birthday cake every single time. I just don't know why. And everybody knew it. And we would sort of try and keep him. Let us do a promo for Paul Harvey. Why don't you? Well, we can do it. Oh, no, I've been doing these for dozens of years. It was the only market where I thought Paul Harvey must have no listeners, because what's the point? You don't have to eat your broccoli. Here's your dessert. So you're right. That's how they market. And circling back to the story of CBS and 60 Minutes and $16 million, CBS is bragging that they didn't apologize. How did that land with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's better that they don't apologize than they do. But the bottom line is, you know, they paid up, and everybody knows they settled and paid up, and so they look the way they look. It's not a good look for anyone, and the people that work there, I'm sure, are very uncomfortable about it. You know, It's a face-saving thing to be able to say, well, we didn't give into this, we didn't give into that, we didn't whatever. But you hear that all the time with settlements everywhere, right? Or plea deals. You know, somebody's in court and they do a plea deal, they plead guilty because they're going to get a lesser sentence, but that didn't mean they didn't do what they did. It's just, it was a way to get them to, you know, get it through the courts quicker and not have to sit through long trials and take the risk of Are you going to get the verdict you want or not? So it's kind of the same thing. And this is a way for lawyers to go, look, we just saved a bundle of money. We didn't have to go to court. We didn't have to spend a fortune on court costs. The lawyers work for CBS. They don't get billed separately. So, what the work they're doing is the work they're doing. And it is what it is. I mean, it's just frustrating for journalists, for quality journalists to see that a settlement like this is made. It gets you to roll your eyes because it can put a damper and create an impression that what you're doing is not the right thing.
Well,
but I want to go on because one of the most frustrating things I've had over the years is people, you say, okay, you're in the news business, and say, oh yeah, just like Fox News or CNN or this. And I'm like, no. Most of what they do, those are talk shows.
Yes.
It's not news. They may call themselves news, but it's not. It's a talk show, and talk shows involve opinions. That's the nature of what talk shows are all about.
Yes.
When you're dealing with what we did at WBBM, it was down the middle news. We didn't take sides. We never. And so when you're in that realm of journalism, and you're not taking sides, and for it to appear that, whoops, maybe a mistake was made, and some people could go, wow, look, CBS, they're a crappy news organization. Just to have that potentially happen can really put a damper on what you're trying to do as a journalist.
To respond to what the first thing you said, you're absolutely right. And when people ask if I'm in the news business, I always say, no, I'm news adjacent. I'm not in the news business. And therefore, I can say just about whatever I want that management isn't going to sack me for. But I want to talk about the subtle sort of Damocles in the form of self-censoring, where, and I have had this happen in talk radio, where there was a strike going on and my union was involved, and it wasn't the part of my union that I work in. It was the voiceover people or the video game people, I forget which. And I had one of them on the air, and I got hauled into the boss's office. You're just self-serving. I'm like, I don't make any money doing video game voiceovers, but you self-censor after a while. If you get called in, or in this case, if $16 million is paid by your organization, it may never come to the story that how you tell a story. It may just be a story you don't tell at all. Would you have you seen that?
I haven't personally, no. There were cases, things that came up where the station may have run a news story, and someone else called management and said, hey, this isn't true, legally, blah, 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 you can't do this. And our management might have said, hey, if you're going to run another story about this organization, person, whatever, we want to know about it first. But never were we told, don't run the story. They wanted to just be aware that it was happening, knowing that they may be contacted. They want to know what's going on, and they want to be on top of it. But I can't say that we ever had anything quelled or that we self-quelled, stopped something from airing over concern that management might not look at it favorably because it might create the bad appearance or looks bad for somebody who's a friend to somebody or something like that. I can't say that ever happened to me.
Well, that is a quality organization. I can tell you that I have a friend who is an editor for a major news network who used to take certain organizations' press releases and just immediately put them in the recycle bin. I don't know where you'd file that under censoring. But I think what makes it to the reporters sometimes is a function of the management of the organization. But I'm delighted to hear that never happened to you. Do you suspect that this settlement may cause things to change?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think 60 Minutes is too legitimate. CBS News is too legitimate. And again, this is a management decision to solve an issue that they had ongoing at CBS, right? And trying for Paramount to get sold, merged, however you want to look at it, get that deal done. So I don't think it will, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't, right? It doesn't mean that management might go, hey, if you do something like this again, we need to know about it, and I don't want you to do it this way. You know, as you said yourself, these kind of interviews have been edited this way for decades.
Yes.
I mean, this is standard journalistic practice. So I don't see that they would change the way they're editing an interview with the thought, oh, someone else is going to come after them. But other people may decide they want to come after them because somebody else got something out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the danger.
What about the ABC settlement? There was nobody trying to merge anything there. In your opinion, what's behind the Stephanopoulos kerfuffle?
I don't know for sure, but I think there probably was a mistake made. You know, he said something in a way that he probably shouldn't have said it, but would an apology be enough? Probably. If it was done at the same time with the same audience. You know, there are some who will do apologies for mistakes that are made, and they hide them. You know, they may have done the story at the height of listenership or viewership, but then they put the apology at a time, you know, on a Sunday at, 4 o'clock in the morning where nobody's going to hear it or see it. That's not right. It needs to be done in the same exact way that it was done the first time. But, to pay out like that, it's all it does is put a damper and it does say to somebody, you better not make that mistake again or you're going to be out of here, or somebody else. The lawyers are going to want to look at things in advance before you put it out. And trust me, there are plenty of investigative news stories that are done by organizations, both nationally and individual, especially on the television side. And don't think those don't get run by lawyers before they air, because they absolutely 100% do, because they need to make sure all their I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Well, if it were up to lawyers, we would just sing Row, Row Your Boat all day long at our microphones if it were up to the lawyers. They're very, very cautious. So I would imagine in any healthy news organizations, there's a little bit of back and forth there. Have you ever, you made me think of another story. I actually had, when you mentioned that the apology should be made by the person who made it or their supervisor in the same way for this directly noting the thing that was done. I think one of the most egregious things that ever happened to me as a talk show host was I said something and it was completely misinterpreted by a advocacy group, and it wasn't what I said. It was what a listener had said. And I was really clear. I had tape that I had shut down this listener immediately. But of course, certain newspapers could say, allegedly, and then they could print whatever they wanted. And at the end of the day, the boss, my boss was on a plane. So his boss, who was an interim boss, apologized on my behalf for something that I had not done. And it was awful. I was out of there. I was like, fine, I'll say my piece on every other talk station in every other major city, and you'll look like crap, which is exactly what I did. But reporters, they have very little power compared to the people who are writing the $16 million checks, the board, the news director, the editor-in-chief. If remembering back to the day, and by the way, we're talking to Ron Gleason, who was breathing the lofty air of the chief editor of WBBM and CBS News in Chicago, if you can cast your mind to when you were a reporter, did you ever run into a situation where you felt like your activity had been misinterpreted because of some interest that was happening above your head?
No, I can't say that I had. I mean, I was pretty lucky, and I worked at a great radio station with great management and understanding. And I want to make clear, too, WBBM, now it's owned by Odyssey, but when it was owned by CBS, it was not a division of CBS News. It was a radio station as part of CBS Radio, which is owned by CBS. CBS News is another division, and that has to do with the network and to some degree the O&O television stations. But we were left alone. When we were owned by CBS, we did our own thing. If we had a question or we needed an issue solved or whatever, we needed a lawyer to look at something, we could go to the CBS nationally, the attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. But we were running our own show, and we didn't have corporate looking over our shoulder at every little thing that we did. We had management, obviously. We had a general manager or a market manager who had to answer to somebody above him. But, it was pretty much, they trusted us to do our job, to serve the people of Chicago and to cover news properly. I never had it happen the other way. I think maybe I was lucky. I can't say that's true for all reporters everywhere. I was a news anchor more than I was a reporter in the field, although when I was doing sports before that, I was reporting tons in the field, and I got into arguments occasionally with the subjects that you were dealing with, but it wasn't like I was misreporting something or whatever. They didn't like the way I was holding a microphone, or they didn't like the question that you were asking, or, it's kind of a different thing when you're a reporter.
Last question, and thanks again, Ron Gleason, for being generous with your holiday weekend time. Looking at the news landscape now in Chicago or other major cities, would you still want to have the kind of career that you embarked on when you began? Is there at the end, would you feel like you had the opportunity to accomplish all the things that you've accomplished?
It's a really interesting question. If you're starting with today, at a time that the broadcast business is tougher from the standpoint of just making money, right? Here's the dilemma. So at BBM, I was the director of news and programming, brand manager, whatever you want to call me, for executive editor for over 17 years. And when I started, this BIA sends out nationally, the highest billing radio stations in the country to be a top 10. We were always in the top 10, and number one in Chicago during the entire time that I was doing it, very luckily. But the amount of revenue dropped dramatically in that 17 years. And that's because advertising has splintered off so much between social media, cable TV, Sirius XM, all these different elements that are out there now, everywhere. And now even the Netflixes and the Disney Pluses, right, they do advertise. They take advertising dollars. So it's so splintered now, it's much more difficult of a business to be successful, which is why there have been so many cutbacks in broadcasting everywhere, whether it's the networks or local stations, et cetera, because there just isn't as much money generated anymore. And by the way, the salaries are higher than they used to be. So when the salaries go up and you're making less money, what are you going to do? You're going to have to cut staff and people and expenses in order to try to generate anything even close of profit that you did before. And trust me, the profits are nowhere what they were before.
Wow.
In terms of the actual job itself,
yes.
In terms of journalism
yes.
and covering stories and all that, yes, I loved what I did. I would do it again.
Okay, we'll leave it there, except I have to say one thing. The salaries in some areas are higher, and in some, they're like, you want a job? You'll work for this. We've redone the union contract. The new people get less, and I have seen that myself. And it takes a lot to get the big bucks people to sit down in a meeting and negotiate a deal that is better for the new people. So just maybe that's happened since you've left, but I know I sat through it.
No.
Yes?
I think that is true for newer people to an extent because it was necessary, but the overall structure, when you do budgets and all that, and you see the total dollars spent on personnel or other things, it always went up.
Well, thank you. I love your perspective, and thanks again for spending time. It was a joy to talk to you, and it's always a joy to hear you on the air, so thanks for that, too. Ron Gleason, former head, you heard him say it, WBBM, greatly awarded and an excellent journalist. It's a minute before 3 o'clock. Our great lawyer friend is coming up in a moment on Edwin Eisendrath Show at WCPT.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
It is 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. I am Turi Ryder, and at the controls, Henry, and we are in for Edwin Eisendrath. I am anyway. I think Henry's here anyway. And we have, you're here most Edwin shows? Yes. So there you are. One regular, one substitute. So forget about accepting no substitutes. You're going to accept this substitute, and you're gonna love it because you get another chance on Monday. I'll be in for Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. If you've heard me visiting at WCPT before, you will know that I have a favorite attorney. He's not my personal attorney. He's my personal friend who is an attorney and a professor of constitutional law who literally wrote the book. In fact, several books. And he teaches, by golly, I'm going to get this right, at the University of California Law School at San Francisco. Is that right this time, David?
Oh, it's so close, but it's just fine. Good afternoon to you, Turi. Happy 5th of July.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm not even sure where we should start. The latest string of indignities from the Supreme Court. Where would you like to start? How about if I just foist this decision on you?
Oh, let's see. Where shall we begin? Why don't we start with the nationwide injunctions, because that one is a little complicated but very interesting and
you had warned
us.
Lot of impact. You had warned us this could be coming.
Oh, yeah.
But I think you had warned us about this in the context of a different lawsuit with a different nationwide injunction. Is that right?
I think that's right, Tori, when we were talking before. I think that's right. You know, what happened was while this case is wrapped up with birthright citizenship, which was one of the first of the executive orders Mr. Trump issued before he had gotten the seat warm in the Oval Office, before he had a chance to put all that gold stuff up there, and he issued his birthright citizenship order.
Yes.
But what the administration did is that they asked the Supreme Court to take up this question of nationwide injunctions separate from birthright citizenship, because what nationwide injunctions means is if and when an injunction is issued against the federal government, does it apply to protect just the plaintiffs wherever they may be, or does it bind the federal government everywhere? And the normal rule is the parties are bound, and that's all, and no further than that. But because the United States is everywhere, that's where you got into this issue. And these cases had started, I take it back about 10 years, where they started in earnest. But every administration has been unhappy about this idea, and it goes back and forth. What this administration did is they said to the Supreme Court, just take up this question of nationwide injunctions. Never you mind about the constitutionality of our orders regarding birthright citizenship. Just tell district courts and circuit courts what they can do. And what the Supreme Court did just a few days ago, with an opinion by Justice Barrett for the usual 6-3 majority, is that she said nationwide injunctions are not an appropriate tool in the toolbox for lower federal courts. What you have to do is, I would say, think a little harder about your case. But the idea is focus on the plaintiffs. Craft relief that is sufficient to protect the plaintiffs before you in the case, and don't worry about overprotecting more people. Don't worry about binding the federal government elsewhere. Just focus on the specifics of the case in front of you, district judge. No more, no less. Now there are tools available. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so now if this were a different kind of case and not one about you're a citizen in Illinois but not in Arkansas, because that's essentially what's happened. If your state has sued and you've gotten a ruling in your favor from a lower court, then so far you're still a birthright citizen in that state. And the red states, if I understand it correctly, have not sued because they think it's just peachy keen with whipped cream on top, that your citizenship doesn't exist. It just if you're born to say undocumented people in America, that you no longer have that citizenship conferred on you. So that, of course, poses crazy scenarios where you're a citizen if you're born in a blue state and not if you're born in a red state, just to simplify it. Is there another case where, or series of cases where the outcome would have been less earth-shattering, for lack of better expression, if it turned out it only applied in your case?
Well, one of the issues that has been coming up recently is with respect to these layoffs in the federal government. And if you bring a lawsuit and you are representing, let's say you're let's use a citizen of Chicago, right? Citizen of Illinois. They work for the federal government in Chicago,
okay.
right, in one of the great big buildings downtown Chicago. If they bring a suit saying, hey, it's illegal to have this broad brush of reductions in force, would that order affect other people in the same agency? Would it affect other federal employees beyond the Northern District of Illinois, which is the federal district where Chicago sits? So that's one that has come up of late. I think there's about 24 of these nationwide injunctions that have been issued against the Trump administration, and all of those cases are going to have to be revisited in light of this recent opinion regarding nationwide injunctions. So it's going to apply to a number of issues. And remember, there is a nonpartisan quality to it in the sense that the Obama administration chafed against this. The Biden administration was unhappy with it as well. One of the cases that came up during the Biden administration has to do with access to abortion pills. And a judge sitting in, I think it's Amarillo, Texas, issued an order that would have had the effect of banning the use of those pills everywhere in the country, not just in the Northern District of Texas. So there's a certain amount of what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. But without a doubt, the immediate beneficiary of this new rule is going to be the Trump administration.
Wow. Okay. Now, the outrage of the three dissenting justices was really about the outcome nationwide. I read little pieces of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I think it was Sotomayor also wrote a dissent, and it got very personal at the Supreme Court level. You want to talk a little bit about that they really went after each other?
They sure did. Well, I mean, what the three dissenters, they see a pattern that is happening, which is this bending over backwards in favor of the Trump administration. The other day, not the nationwide injunction case, but Justice Sotomayor the other day, in an order that was issued, I think at the beginning of this week, is that she said, well, the administration certainly has the Supreme Court on speed dial. Ooh. Meaning that the Supreme Court the majority have been so deferential. So I think that part of that the concern upset is this overall where the trend is going, but also Justice Jackson certainly said, look, we can't confine this to this abstract question of nationwide injunctions. You have to look at the context, and the context, as you said, is birthright citizenship, and we're going to end up with this complete and utter mess until this gets straightened out. And what the administration wants to do is contrary to 150 years of very clear Supreme Court law. And then where it got testy is Justice Barrett took out after Justice Jackson in her majority opinion, basically saying, come on, what are you doing? What are you so upset about? And what are you wasting your time on the merits? The question is this abstract question of law, and so save your fire, girlfriend. So you can see that the temperature is going up there in the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court, that six-justice majority, has been issuing so many momentous opinions in favor of the presidency. It isn't just Mr. Trump. It's the presidency, the immunity case, the refusal to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment regarding people who have engaged in insurrection. It's just case after case. And also on this emergency docket, this willingness to reach in a way that is contrary to normal procedure and correcting errors or what they deem to be errors in the lower courts the moment the administration cries wolf.
Now, I've heard it said that in a way they're not just giving power to the administration, they're also taking more power for themselves because they're saying none of these lower courts can decide for the country, but we can and we should. Is that an accurate assessment?
Right. I think that's totally fair. Right. That's one of the shifts of power that's going on. Right. So one shift, without a doubt, is the Trump administration grabbing more power from a very supine Congress, reaching into what traditionally have been states' rights kinds of issues. If we get to, say, calling out the Marines and the National Guard in California, but also this point of the court. You are 100% right. But to the extent the U.S. Supreme Court is exercising emergency power to reach into ongoing cases that are in front of the lower courts and saying, we will decide this, only we know what the right answer is, and we're going to correct your errors right away, that is contrary to the way the courts have operated, which is we normally follow what's called the final judgment rule, which is appellate courts don't interfere with lower court decision-making in the meantime, unless and until you get to a final judgment. Then everything can be reviewed, because what looks to be so important at one moment isn't necessarily important later. So I do agree with you that the Supreme Court is also taking away some of the autonomy of the lower courts.
Okay, wait, because you confused me.
We will decide this issue.
You have confused me. No, you know me. I'm easily confused. And if you're just joining us, this is Professor David Levine, professor of constitutional law and my personal friend, who I adore, who teaches at, it used to be called Hastings, which was really easy, but now it's called the University of California at San Francisco Law School. Did I finally get that right? No.
So close. You just have a block. University of California College of the Law, San Francisco.
All right.
Is the full mouthful. That's the full mouthful. You can say UC Law. You can say that's
UC
the
Law. I don't want to. I want to get it right.
Yeah,
I don't want to. So, and you
do an elocution letter.
You can't make me. You cannot make me. So
you said I confused you, and I'm sorry about that, because I'm sure.
Because I didn't take an LSAT, and I'm not a law student, and I don't play one on TV. Would you explain slowly for those of us who are not attorneys what that means? What you just said about the lower court, and it doesn't go into effect until the other court. That's where I just kind of went.
I'm sorry.
What?
Yeah. Okay. So the way our courts normally operate. So of course we have trial courts.
Yes.
Whether we're talking about state courts in Illinois, whether we're talking about Cook County courts or in other counties in Illinois or in Wisconsin, within the whole listening area. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
And then there are federal courts. And in both systems, typically the structure is a trial court level, then there's an appellate court, and then there's either the state Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court on top, okay? And the normal rule is you let trial judges finish an entire case and issue what's called a final judgment before you can appeal anything. Now, there are exceptions, but our baseline rule is that we don't want cases bouncing up and down between the trial courts and the appellate courts in the middle of a case. What we do is we say, look, by and large, trial judges are going to get things right. By and large, what seems so important now is less important later. So preserve your appeals, and when everything is done, then you can start the appellate process. Now, again,
now I understand. What are the wait? Now I have to ask you, what are the exceptions?
Okay. One of the main exceptions that is applicable to many of these cases that seem to zoom to the Supreme Court is it is possible to immediately appeal from whether a lower court, a trial court, grants or denies a preliminary injunction. And a lot of these cases are starting with a preliminary injunction. So birthright citizenship, those cases began, whether one in Maryland, one in Massachusetts, one in Seattle, in the federal courts, with the plaintiffs coming to the federal judge saying, please issue a preliminary injunction because we're going to have babies being born 30 days from now. Babies are going to be born, and we're not going to know whether they're citizens or not. So please issue a preliminary injunction. And in each of those three cases, those trial judges said, yes, I think this is so unconstitutional, and I think there will be such irreparable harm. I will issue that preliminary injunction now. And by the way, it has nationwide effect. And that order is definitely immediately appealable. It's a big exception to the final judgment rule that we definitely teach in law school because it is a big exception. But that's one that's understood. But here's the deal: is that why it's unusual with the Supreme Court. Normally, We let the appellate court, so in Chicago, we're talking about the Seventh Circuit, which covers Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Out here in California, we're talking about the Ninth Circuit, which covers California and about 8 other states. But normally, you let that appeal go to the circuit court, and the circuit court says, we agree with the preliminary injunction, we don't agree with the preliminary injunction, but the Supreme Court keeps its nose out of it.
But now
they don't have to review it. But now the Supreme Court, right, and then the administration now has been running to the Supreme Court and sometimes even jumping the circuit court.
How do they do that?
You have to help us.
How do they do that?
They love to use the word emergency. They bring a claim as an emergency request, and the Supreme Court, instead of saying, go away, call us when the case is over, which is the normal rule, let the trial judges do their work, let the appellate court supervise as necessary, and in the most extreme, most unusual cases, we will intervene, because the Supreme Court normally acts in about 1% of the cases that are presented to them.
Okay, all right, hold up. So I just want to sum up what you're saying to make sure that I got it. So
I know it gets complicated.
No, I think I've got it.
We're doing about 2 weeks of school right now.
I think I have it. So the emergency, which, as you pointed out, there's one at the border, there's one in trade, I forget where else, there's one with gay people in the military. It's all a big emergency. But
everything's an emergency, right.
Which is like your kid coming to you screaming, and you're like, no, this needs a Band-Aid. Your finger is still attached. So the context...
We're not running to the University of Chicago Hospital.
That's right. Except for my husband. He does stuff like that. No, my husband does stuff like that. I think you may have heard about the $800 Band-Aid, but if not, I'll tell it later. So it really was. It was an $800 Band-Aid. We sat, I didn't mind the $800. I did mind the $800, but we sat in the emergency room for an entire day because he was sure he needed stitches, and he came out with a Band-Aid, and I'm like, oh, okay then. So, but now, the reason that people are saying that the administration has the Supreme Court on speed dial, their basis for saying that is that they've been willing to take every case as an emergency. That's the context.
Exactly.
Okay,
that's exactly right.
Understand.
That's it.
Woo, I feel so proud.
It took us a while to get there, and you cut to the chase beautifully.
I'm known for that.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Right. The administration says, we got an emergency. We got you. We need you here. We need you. And the Supreme Court had said, oh, poor babies, please come to us. Let us fix the problem for you, and we'll kiss that little boo-boo with an order telling that bad district court judge to knock it off.
Yeah, it's funny. I immediately thought of kissing the little boo-boo, but that was we think alike there. So the criticism of the Supreme Court at this point is less about what they're doing and more about the fact that they're doing anything at all.
Doing it so quickly, right?
Yeah.
Doing it so quickly.
They should be waiting. They should be waiting.
Right.
You should not, if you have a headache, you should not necessarily be running to a brain surgeon. You should go to your doctor first. Right.
That's right. The medical school equivalent that I've learned is when you hear hoof beats, think horses, not zebras.
That's a good one.
What's the most common thing? Right. What's the most common thing? And with the Supreme Court, the context is assume everything is operating normally. Let the lower courts do their jobs. You only intervene in the rarest of cases that require intervention because you have to settle discrepancies.
Like Bush v. Gore. Like Bush v. Gore, where we would have had no president.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me...
Right, and even that one, they shouldn't have intervened. But that, at least, the stakes are high enough to talk about being intervened. But that's the issue, is that they are too quick to listen to the administration saying, we've got an emergency, okay? In Philadelphia, I don't know if in Chicago they say the same thing, but in Philadelphia, this is called a yo, judge motion. Right? Yo, judge, we've got to tell you what's going on down here. And you got to do something about it.
And so the mere fact...
have been very responsive to that.
So one could say that the mere fact that they're willing to be guided by the administration and believe that all these things are emergencies tells you that the Supreme Court is not necessarily as unbiased as we would like them to be. Is that an accurate assessment? I
think reasonable minds could think that. And if you look at what the three commonly dissenting justices are saying, that's exactly what's going on.
Okay, so we have this egregious decision, which just sketch quickly what the outcome of you can't have a national injunction in this instance of birthright citizenship. How is this likely to play out in states that haven't sued to stop it? Oh, and while we're on the subject, when your state does, when you bring a suit in, say, Washington State, which did, and the court rules, you're right, everybody hold on until this case comes through. What's happening in Washington? Are people citizens? What's happening in Alabama? Are people not? What is happening?
Right. Well, for one thing, the rules are not changing for 30 days after the decision was issued, which is, what is it now, a week old or something, 10 days old. Mm-hmm. So nobody's citizenship is in question for at least 30 days. And we're only talking about, it's big, but we're talking about newborns. So nobody's going to retroactively lose their citizenship because of this. But what the workaround may well be is that these cases can often be reframed as class actions. And in a class action, what you're allowed to do is to say in your complaint, there are other people out there who are like us, and we have common issues with those other people. There's too many of those people to bring them into the lawsuit individually. We are capable of representing them, and we want you, Judge, to frame this case in this special category called class action. And indeed, within hours, the Maryland case, there was an amended complaint filed to say we want to represent all the women who are pregnant and who are going to be, on the verge of giving birth after that 30 days is over. And so the workaround may well be that we convert these cases into class action cases and to say, all right, you're not only representing two people who are the named plaintiffs, but you're representing similarly situated people. And it would be similar with the states. Now, one of the opinion, Kavanaugh and Alito wrote concurring opinions saying, don't go wild with those tools. You be careful. And that may be that the administration may start crying to the Supreme Court.
It's an emergency. It's an emergency.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. How dare they certify that class, that nationwide class?
All right. So stop. So
yes.
What has to happen? Because, again, I've been doing some reading, but I'm no lawyer and I don't play one on TV. What has to actually happen for a class to cross state borders? I understand it's more complicated. You have to find somebody in every state you want to be affected. So if I'm in Illinois, a blue state, which has ruled that birthright, or which never tried to take away birthright citizenship, does your suit have to come in a state where that's not an issue, or does it have to come in a state where it's currently an issue and then add like beads on a string other states to it? Can one person in each state be enough? Do you need like 10 people in each state? What do you need for this to work?
Well, we don't exactly know. There are some cases.
We just don't.
Because
I just fell off my chair.
Cases,
okay.
No, I know because part of it has to do with. Yeah, again, we're going to law school a lot here, but there are different kinds of class actions, and these cases do not involve money. And the cases where we've learned about limits on class actions and state lines almost invariably have to do with money cases, damages cases.
Well, I could argue that it involves money. I could.
But direct payments. But the idea is
wait. You could absolutely. You could say this kid is born to impoverished parents. If it's an American citizen, it's entitled to some benefits. If it's not, then it's not.
True, but you're not likely to get that money out of the federal government. But I wouldn't say we would never frame it that way. But if you want to go fast,
wait.
You're not going to bring those damages claims right now.
Here in Chicago, one of the big causes for like getting people off the out of the country is that the kids are getting benefits and the parents then take those benefits. You got a kid that's getting SNAP benefits and the parents can eat the food. I mean, that kind of argument amongst the anti-immigration folks is very common. So, and it's financial,
right?
But
Yes, it's true, but here's why I'm hesitating here.
Okay.
Is that if you just keep your eye on the prize, which is the prize is get rid of this stupid birthright citizenship executive order. And if you start mixing in these damages cases, and if you start saying there are kids who are, kids in this category, this happens to them, and kids in this other category, you're going to lose the class action certification because a court is going to say that common questions do not predominate over individual questions. And right now you want everybody in the same boat.
Okay.
It's all exactly the same.
Okay.
And leave for another day those damage claims.
Okay.
We're going to prevent harm by getting birthright citizenship cleared up so that it can be returned to what we understood it to be on January 19th, 2025, going all the way back to the 1860s. And then you're going to avoid the kind of harm you're potentially talking about, is they're going to lose benefits and all that. The whole game here is we want to prevent irreparable injury. We want to prevent multiplicity of lawsuits that tens of thousands of kids would be trying to sue for damages. So if we go down that road now, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot with respect to getting class action on the big issue, which is get birthright citizenship straightened out for the whole country.
Okay. I just wanted to point out that could be a financial issue if that would be to the advantage of our side. But you're saying it would be a disadvantage to our side. So now.
Right now.
Right now. So now the objective is just to say, this is a mess. You're trying to throw out 150 years of history. And so what has to be in your class? How many people and where can they be and where do they have to be? And by the way, if you're just joining us, this is Professor David Levine, constitutional law expert. I'm not even going to try it. At a big fancy law school in San Francisco. He's written a lot of books. Yes, and he's fun.
I'm a little guy. I'm a little part of the University of California.
He's a big player in constitutional law. So go ahead.
Now the question of because you're asking the question of if the term of art is numerosity, and all you need is
I just want to stop for a minute. Numerosity is a word I have never heard before, and I just want to take a moment because whenever somebody uses a word I've never heard before, I like to just take that word in. Numerosity, everybody, and it means
too many people. So many people, you can't name them all, and you can't make them individual parties in a case.
Okay.
So, if you had a situation where, I don't know, let's say in your neighborhood you had a nuisance case, and you've got, let's say, 20 neighbors, all right, and neighbor number 21 is the pain in the neck. Whatever, singing at 4 a.m, or, whatever urban noise there is. 20 neighbors, we know them all. We don't have a numerosity problem, right? You can get, you can sign up neighbors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera.
Okay.
You don't have a numerosity problem. But if we're talking about babies, pregnant women with babies to be born in the next months, we have no idea how many there are. We can't get their names. You can't, you can't have them join individually. So it's as small as 40 or 50 people. Cases have said, that's too numerous. Class action is okay. But the kind of scale we're talking about here, there's no question a court would say, yes, there are too many people to join them, too hard to find them. So that's one of the requirements for a class action, that you have too many people to name.
Okay. And do you have to find a representative? How many do you have to find if it's an constitutional issue of who's going to be a citizen and who's not? Do you need one in every state that hasn't brought a suit yet? Can you even have one in a state that hasn't brought a suit yet?
I don't think you have to have one from every state. It's better to have a number because what you want to do is to show here are representative cases and we truly have a common problem. So I can't tell you, I don't think you'd have to have one from every single state. Again, that was going back to where I was talking about damage cases versus these kind of cases. I think you could go with fewer plaintiffs here. Again, I looked at that Maryland case. In the Maryland case, the federal court in Maryland, where they had, I think, 8 or 9 pregnant women as their named plaintiffs. They just added some causes of action saying, and we want to represent everybody else who looks who's in the same situation, wherever they may be. And we'll see if the Maryland court accepts that, and we'll see if the Supreme Court, if they feel like intervening, quickly, and says to the federal court in Maryland, you can't do that. We really need to have 50 class actions. One for each state.
Well, it's going to be very
necessary.
It's going to be very telling if they do that, because they really will not look impartial if they say, you can't do this as a preliminary injunction, and we're going to be really persnickety about your class. Basically, They're taking a side there. Yes? Yes, that's right. Right, that's the risk. So if I were, so I haven't seen the amended complaint. I've been read about it. So I think they have very smart lawyers in that group, and I'm sure they've thought some of this through, and that they're trying to make their representation as broad as possible, so that they will have a pretty good case if and when that goes up on an emergency appeal. Okay. I want to move to another one of the many indignities that we are suffering now as a result of the Trump administration. We talked a little bit about this last hour with the $16 million settlement that CBS just paid to Donald Trump's election or political fund. At what?
I thought it was to the library.
Library. I'm sorry, you're correct.
Pay the legal expenses, and then the rest goes to the library.
Well, the legal expenses, as we discussed last hour, are going to be considerable. But, he's going to have to come up with some money for a place to store that Qatari plane. So he's going to need to have some money. It costs a lot of money. Imagine what a car wash costs. Now imagine you have to pay people to wash that plane every week. That's a lot of money.
Right.
So I understand that he's trying.
I think Ron DeSantis has a plan, though.
Oh.
The plan is they're going to take people who are going to be stuck in that awful camp, the alligator Alcatraz.
They'll put them on a plane.
We'll get them to wash the plane.
Oh, no,
I think them to wash the plane.
Well, you can make them wash the plane, or if you really want to punish them, as anyone who has sat on a tarmac for 3-4 hours waiting to take off, you just put them on the plane.
There you go. That'll work.
I don't know why he's even bothering with the Alcatraz. Just get a bunch of planes that aren't flying and just put people on them and feed them peanuts or pretzels.
Oh, let's not tell it that. There's a lot of planes sitting outside of Tucson.
All right, then. Okay.
They keep a dry dock of airplanes, unused airplanes there.
Yes. Don't give him any ideas. Well, they've got a Democratic governor in Arizona.
If you've ever seen a picture, there's hundreds of airplanes out there in dry dock. And because the weather is literally dry and sunny, and so that they don't deteriorate. So let's not give them a new idea.
Okay, let's not. Plus, it's the Democratic governor of Arizona, at least for now, and she would not probably allow that. So, but it is a thought. It is a thought. Some more of the people who are undocumented could hold giant umbrellas over the planes in order to keep them from. Never mind. Okay, so let's go to the news thing.
Paramount. I thought the topic was Paramount.
Yes, it was.
Paramount CBS. I'll rein you back in.
I need that. I do need that. So it's pretty clear that Sherry Redstone felt that she needed to pay Donald Trump's library or some entity that Donald Trump was controlling in order to do business. That's what the essence of it was. He wasn't going to let her merge her company with Ellison's company unless she paid him money. And that you would think would be obvious to any court. Is it possible that someone, or does this get back to the Supreme Court saying no matter what Trump does as president, it's fine? But how do you sort that out?
Well, it is totally smelly, totally. Now, ABC, of course, did the same thing. ABC knuckled under when Trump didn't like some things that I think it was George Stephanopoulos said.
But it was different.
Perfectly legitimate.
Let me tell you why it was different. I'll tell you why it was different as someone in the media. Okay. So ABC just wanted to carry on, and they wanted their lawyers to do other things, and they wanted Trump to go away, so they paid. But Sherry Redstone had an issue before the government, the FCC, anyway. And that's different than just, I want to continue producing CBS 60 Minutes. This was, I want to do something with my company that Donald Trump's FCC was in a position to keep them from doing. So one is I want to continue doing business as I do it. And the other is essentially you're going to keep me from selling my business. And I think those are two different issues. Would you disagree?
I disagree. No, I don't disagree. I agree with you. The problem is, can we thread the needle here to say, did a crime take place or not? And here the problem is the Supreme Court has been so deferential to white-collar criminals. They have made it harder and harder and harder to prosecute white-collar crime, and particularly with politicians. There's any number of cases, one involving the former governor of Virginia, but there's any number of others where they make it harder and harder to prosecute those cases successfully against corrupt politicians. And at the moment, this Justice Department is certainly not going to turn around and sue either Shari Redstone or Mr. Trump for bribery, right?
Huh.
So that's one problem, right, is would it ever happen? Now, we have a statute of limitations, and, maybe in some other administration they might look at it. But the problem is did Paramount pay the money hoping to buy peace, hoping to cut off a business problem, and because there's any number of reasons people settle cases.
Right.
Or do we have a recording where somebody, Mr. Trump or somebody acting clearly on behalf of Mr. Trump, says to somebody over at Paramount, whether it's Redstone or whether it's somebody at CBS, it's going to cost you X amount of money, and if you pay X amount of money, then the merger goes through, and this is how you're going to pay the money.
Question.
If we don't have that recording, it's really tough to win the case.
Even if you did have the recording, under the recent ruling that anything Donald Trump does in office is fine if he can somehow, some way cloak it under his official duties, would that protect him even if there were a recording?
Well, but the lawsuit was not based on his official duties. The lawsuit against CBS and against Paramount, the parent owner, was that because an interview with Kamala Harris was deceptively edited, somehow that hurt Mr. Trump as a candidate for president, not as president.
I see.
So even this would be beyond the perimeter of the official duties of the president,
because he wasn't president at the time. Okay, all right.
So we wouldn't have that problem, but we would have the problem of the Supreme Court bending over backwards for the Trump administration, but B, being very hostile to prosecutions for of government officials for things like bribery. So if the CBS has good lawyers, I have no doubt, and I'm sure that this thing was structured in such a way that it is not screaming bribery.
Okay, all right. Now let's move to another one. Let's talk about the January 6th defendant who was on tape yelling, what is he yelling? Kill them, hit them, and who's now working for the FBI. Can the Justice Department or the FBI, can they just hire an axe murderer if they want to when Donald Trump has pardoned them?
This is a pardoned axe murderer. Having been pardoned, then the slate is wiped clean. And so the question... So then it's as if it never happened. We have cases going back. There were some post-Civil War cases on this. Mm-hmm. There was the question of if somebody was pardoned by President Andrew Johnson, right, for whatever they might have done in the Civil War, does that disqualify them? Does their prior conduct as, say, officers of the Confederacy, does that disqualify them or not from further service? And basically, the answer was you are, by and large, you're home free. By and large, you're home free. Now, that's why there's that section of the 14th Amendment regarding insurrection, but that was meant to be pretty limited in its application. But there is a case called Ex parte Klein, which goes back to this period. But so that in terms of this guy who, he was at the Capitol on January 6th, convicted of some crimes, pardoned, and now he's he's now in the Justice Department. I think that's outrageous, but legal.
Okay. And then I have this list. It's just so awful.
So many.
It's so awful. Why don't you pick one? I just did two. Now you pick one.
All right. Well, I was thinking that related to this is the idea of settling, because you're saying Paramount settling with the administration. The flip side of the administration spending money to settle rather bogus claims with January 6th insurrectionists, right? Ashley Babbitt, the poor, the woman who was killed, which is very sad. But if you've seen the tape, I think it was justified shooting. Yep. But from the administration's point of view, her wrongful death case is valid, and she deserves $5 million. That's my understanding of what the settlement is. And other people who have been punished, who were punished for their activities on January 6th and now have been pardoned, many of them are going to line up saying, hey, we should be paid too.
Yes.
If we were injured while we were engaged in that patriotic act of trying to overturn the government, and we were pardoned, and so therefore we should get damages from the government. And if the Justice Department wants to open the checkbook to them, who is to stop them?
Well, who is to stop them?
And the next election. But
okay.
That's it.
All right. Speaking of the next election, and I don't know if this is up your alley or not, but I think it does have something to do with Congress allocating funds. Pete Hegseth apparently unilaterally and just maybe because he could, stopped in-process shipments of U.S. arms to Ukraine. Now, we've heard about clawing back money and the efforts that various agencies and recipients of federal money are making in order to make the point that that's not legal. But what about money that's not only been allocated, it's been spent? Can Pete Hegseth say, yeah, well, we bought this missile for Ukraine, but now I'm not going to give it to them?
Well, I guess how do we craft the lawsuit? One that comes to mind is if members of Congress tried to sue to say, look, we allocated that money specifically and it's being withheld. The problem is the Supreme Court would likely say it's a political question and it's for Congress to pass new legislation. The other one that comes to mind, would be that the government of Ukraine could sue, but not in a case where we're making the weapons available to them, as opposed to they paid for the weapons, and now, let's say Secretary Hegseth was saying no, and was neither giving them the weapons nor a refund. Right? These are weapons where we are allocating the weapons to the government of Ukraine. Right? We're paying our domestic munition suppliers for the weapons, and then giving them. So I don't see Ukraine being able to bring a lawsuit either.
On top of which, it wouldn't be very smart of them because they don't have any weapons, and we do.
Right,
so,
that's right. Bite the hand that feeds you.
Yes, or in this case, the hand that arms you. Bad idea.
Exactly. That's right. With a mighty outstretched arm, you might say.
That is right.
Right. Right. So, Zelensky's smart enough, right? He's smart enough to not do that.
He's turned out to be fairly smart, although he makes the mistake. It's always a mistake in public to contradict Trump. I mean, we've now seen how many national leaders just suck it up and smile while he says these absurd things about them.
Right. That seems to be part of what you have to do to get along.
Yeah, it's really bad. And it's interesting. I don't know if you saw this. Reuters a few weeks ago did a poll. I Google Trump voter regret every day just to see. And Reuters did a piece where people don't like his manner, but they're still glad they voted for him because whatever their reason is. But one of the reasons that keeps coming up a lot is that they like a national leader who looks strong. And obviously, these are people who've never left the country because what he looks to most people in the world is odious. But they don't. They don't know that. So
they don't see it.
Yeah,
they don't see it. That's for sure. Well, wait till those rural hospitals start closing. Wait till people start losing their medical benefits. Wait till they start losing SNAP, and wait till they get about 12 cents in their tax return, and wait till they don't actually get no taxes on Social Security and no taxes on tips, because it's all with paper tricks for the backers of the bill to be able to say those things.
Mm. So what else is on your list of egregious behavior by the Supreme Court or other courts this week?
Well, one of them was the Supreme Court giving the green light to letting the administration send people to third countries without due process. Lower court.
Oh,
right?
Yes, that was on my list. Yeah.
Saying, you need to give 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever, to give these people a chance to present their case as to, number one, why they shouldn't be deported, but number two, why they shouldn't be deported to that particular place, why there's a particular problem with whatever that place might be, whether it is because of a fear of violence being sent home or a fear of going to some third-party place, whatever it may be. And because at least one opinion, the Supreme Court had said, yes, they're entitled to due process. And so because the administration has taken the position that once these people are out of the country, they're not our problem and there's no due process rights, the lower courts have been saying, all right, then let's wait. Let's give them due process rights before you can before they're sent off. And but the Supreme Court intervened and on a preliminary emergency basis lifted those orders, which said you can't send somebody to a third country without giving them, again, 14 days, 30 days of a chance to make their case. And the Supreme Court lifted that preliminary injunction, again, over very impassioned, very articulate, and well thought out dissents. I think on that one, actually, there was one paragraph saying what the order was, and then Justice Sotomayor wrote about 10 pages explaining why this was so terrible in great, great detail, and the Supreme Court didn't even bother to explain themselves. And then there was a subsequent order because one of the lower court judges was trying to protect like 8 people who are in Djibouti, and they don't want to be sent to South Sudan where there's a war going on. And the Supreme Court reached in to slap down even that order in very harsh terms, saying, no, there's no rights here.
Question.
So that one's pretty bad.
Question.
Yes.
On what basis can we send people to third countries that aren't their countries to begin with, whether they've had their fair process or not? What gives the United States the right to say you can't be here, and on top of that, we're going to send you to be incarcerated in, I don't know, Paraguay?
Well, I think this goes back to their invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. This claim that all these people somehow are a threat, a threat to national security, and that because of that emergency, they can do some of these things. So that there is an issue when somebody is deported. Once we get to the point of, your claims of staying here are not well founded. You've had due process on that. You have to leave the country. We're going to deport you somewhere. Then the question is, okay, to where? And what the administration has done is aggressively use these third-party places, whether it's El Salvador or, again, South Sudan or wherever, to send people, but it's all invoking emergency authority.
And are these people once sent to a third world country or even here? What kind of humane conditions are they entitled to, if any?
Well, our meaning the Trump administration's position has been not our problem. We're not running those facilities. We sent them to El Salvador, but we don't have anything to say about how those places are run. And indeed, even this one in Florida, the administration has started taking the position of, Florida put that up. That's not a U.S. facility. State of Florida put that up. So we have nothing to say about what the conditions are. So they have tried to box, to protect themselves, build walls around the administration's responsibility.
So by this logic, you may recall in World War II, there were some ships of refugees that were turned back to Germany where people went to concentration camps and were killed. That was
right, the St. Louis and other ones. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So by this logic, we can then ship people off to countries where we know they will be killed, deliberately killed, according to this logic.
If there's no stopping place to it, and certainly that's been the administration's position, then yeah, that's right. And whether it's done slowly or whether it's done immediately, the administration's logic is not our problem. Now, we've had a case back. We'll see if it gets anywhere. Abrego Garcia, now that he's back in the United States, he's filed a civil case for damages, and he's trying to pin responsibility on the administration. And there's chapter and verse in that civil complaint for damages about the awful conditions that he was forced to endure in El Salvador, being on his knees for hours on end and all kinds of things. And he's trying to pin responsibility for that on the administration, saying, you paid for this, right? You sent money to El Salvador so that they would take care of our prisoners, our deportees, and therefore the administration is responsible. We'll see if that gets anywhere. But there's no particular stopping place to the logic of the administration on that. You know, if something horrendous happens, not our responsibility. We just sent the people there, but then after that, you know, sue the people who are running the facility, not us. Go sue El Salvador. Go sue South Sudan. Good luck.
Wow. It's okay. So with the final few minutes then, where should we be sending our support if we want to stop this kind of thing?
Right. It is the places that have been fighting these, the people who are fighting for election integrity, people like the ACLU, people like CASA, which is one of the organizations representing these women, the pregnant women, I think they're in Washington. So you want to look at who's bringing these lawsuits time and time again to try and rein in this lawlessness, to try and adhere to the rule of law. That's where I'd put my money. Election integrity, and then who's bringing these lawsuits. That's where I would go.
Well, David Levine, I thank you for being generous with your time on a weekend. That's Professor David Levine, University of California's Law School in San Francisco. It's a pleasure always to have you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. See you next time.
Yes. It's 3:57. The 2026 midterm election may be 16 months away, but WCPT has already started interviewing candidates, and we've been posting the audio on our website. Visit heartlandsignal.com/candidates to hear and share the latest interviews. If you hear somebody say something good, you want to take that link and send it to a friend. That includes U.S. Senate candidates Juliana Stratton and Mallory McMorrow, congressional candidates Lori Fine and Daniel Biss, and gubernatorial candidates David Jolly and Jocelyn Benson. And more we're adding all the time. You'll find the candidate interviews tab at the top of our website, heartlandsignal.com. Thank you so much for being part of the show today. Even those of you who would like me to go away, I'm glad you texted because, you know, a pulse. It's nice to know that you're out there hating me. And I used to joke when I did talk radio every day, for $50 donated to our favorite charity, we'll send somebody over to turn off your radio. But I'm not full-time here, so I didn't get to offer that full service. But you do want to keep the number for everybody else and me again on Monday. The Credo Mobile phone and text line, 773-763-9278. Credo Mobile, a progressive phone company that's better for all people and the planet. Visit credomobile.com. Who's next, Henry? I didn't even ask.
Neighbors Radio and...
Neighbors Radio's next?
If Cage Wells Can Talk is at 5.
And people, you better tell me because I'm not paying attention. Who's next?
At 5 o'clock, we have If Cage Wells Could Talk with Jody Whittaker.
Oh, very cool. And thanks, Henry. And thanks, everyone, Mark and Matt and Andy Miles for helping put this show together. I'll see y'all Monday. It's a minute and a half before 4 o'clock. We are live, local, and progressive, WCPT.